across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of Common Sense. It's a Thursday afternoon. We mooch towards the autumnal months of September and beyond in fine form. The news agenda does not let us down. And of course, we have the best audience on planet Earth, so there's always plenty to say. And invariably, the good stuff comes from you, not from us. Ed Miliband's net zero lunacy is being blamed for a shock rise in energy bills this winter. Ofgem confirming that wind farms are actually driving costs up. It was meant to go the other way, Ed. Meant to go the other way. What is the answer to the UK energy bill crisis? Because there is a flipping crisis. We now have direct debits coming out of our bank accounts that previously would have paid your monthly mortgage. Also this afternoon, a terrorist from ISIS, the ISIS beheading gang dubbed the Beatles, has sparked fury after applying to return to the UK, with victims' families calling it an outrageous insult that could give him cushy treatment in a British jail. This man can go to flipping hell, frankly. Ringo Go to Hell is the big headline there as well. We'll have more on that story. And Chancellor Rachel Reeves is plotting a tax raid on landlords with plans to apply national insurance to rental income to help plug her 50 billion quid black hole in public finances of her own making, I should add. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. I do want to hear from you, by the way, if you are a landlord. If you do that for a living, or whether it's most landlords are accidental landlords, they were left a house in their parents' will or something like that, rented it out, made a few quid. And you know what? This government absolutely hates. They hate landlords. They literally see landlords as some kind of old laird running the parish, some multi-squillionaire character with a castle looking down on his tenants. They genuinely see it like that. They believe that. So this is fair game for them. Just knock the landlords. I tell you what, they would be royally stuffed if it wasn't for private landlords who are propping up a housing crisis in this country. If you are a landlord, I want your response to this as well. What are you thinking in terms of another tax, in addition to all the new rules on the Renters' Rights Bill, the new bits of paperwork? Everything's a few hundred quid here, a few hundred quid there. At the end of the month, you're left with almost nothing. And the rules and regs surrounding it are the kind of things you wouldn't, frankly, give to somebody who ran an atomic bomb-making factory. I mean, it's just extraordinary bullet point list of do's and don'ts, just for the audacity to rent out your dead parents' house. We'll open up the lines on that one as well. I want to hear from you if you are a jobbing landlord. And I want to hear from you on the answer to the UK's energy bill crisis. Now, it's an energy bill crisis, really. I don't think there's any similar size economy anywhere on planet Earth at the moment that has bills at the levels that we do. I wasn't joking when I said the kind of bill that people are paying is the sort of bill that resembled what a mortgage payment was like a few years ago. I know things change, and I understand the notion of inflation and the idea that, you know, things will be a bit more expensive now than 20 years ago. But nonetheless, the disproportionality of your energy bill when you're paying, I think last time we talked about this, anywhere between 150 quid a month, 200, 300 pounds a month as well in some, just to heat your home. I remember my first house. I appreciate this was towards the end of the 90s, but nonetheless, that's half an hour ago in the grander scale. I had a standing order with the electricity company for 20 quid and one with the gas company for 20 quid. And that saw me right for years. I don't think it ever went up in the time I lived in that house. It was just what it was, 40 quid a month, covered both. What the hell happened? Well, we know what's happened recently. Ed Miliband came along and mucked it all up. First of all, he said, hey, it's all going to be cheaper under us. You're going to be paying diddly, Frank. In fact, I'll give you 300 quid. We're going to make sure your bills are £300 cheaper. And now we know they're actually going to be more expensive. Your typical bill in this country on an annual basis, £1,755. Well over 100 quid a month. just to heat your house and put the kettle on. Good Lord. Now we understand, just to compound, I don't even know if it's a mystery, frankly, we now understand that some of this is actually down to not just Ed Miliband himself, but the net zero policy that he's implementing. 0344 499 1000 if you want a word on that, because we now know that the regulator Ofgem said policy costs imposed by the Energy Secretary have contributed to the price cap rising at double the rate forecasts. Households will pay more. This is the best bit. I mean, you can't make this old guff up. Households will pay more to switch off wind turbines at times when they're generating too much power, as well as funding gas plants to step in when the wind is not blowing. I mean, what is it, blowing too much? Not at all. What the hell's going on? Do we chop the windmills down and say, I'll tell you what, can we just go back to running it like we kind of used to? We've got a squillion years worth of energy still left in the ground. Is that not the best way to do this? I'm all for an alternative source of energy if, number one, it works as efficiently as to what we've had before, but number two, that it's going to cost less than we had before. You don't invent something and say, oh, this is progress. Well, it's not progress if you're asking people to part with extra amounts of cash, bills going up by another 35 quid. That's double what they thought they were going to be. Households paying more, and of course Labour pledged to slash energy bills by 300 quid. Do you remember that during the general election campaign? They kept saying this. They kept saying it for about a week. And they said it a lot. There's some great montages out there of Ed saying it, Rachel saying it, and of course Sir Keir saying it as well. They loved wheeling it out. Your energy bills will be £300 cheaper. It was said at the same time as we won't cut, winter fuel benefits for old people, and there'll be no increase in council tax. Oh, and farmers can sleep easy at night. It was at that time. And then it all went to mush. No one who was watching closely believed any of this old guff. But they kept saying it until they realised they probably couldn't keep to it, and then they didn't mention it again. Shadow Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho said the latest increases were directly linked to Mr Miliband's controversial dash to decarbonise Britain's entire electricity supply in the next 48 months. Man alive, isn't that sort of thing that... But, if you were reading this as a sort of student studying planet Earth and our infrastructure and our systems, how long would it change to decarbonise a country? You'd probably said, I don't know, 48 years maybe? Or half a century to get back to, or to get to a place? No, Ed wants to do it in 48 months. The man's a nut job. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. We're joined by the political strategist Peter Barnes, who's back with us in the studio. Peter, good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you doing?
All good at this end. I mean, this is the... Well, let's start with good old Ed, of course. And this comes around because the regulator Ofgem has essentially sort of embarrassed the net zero secretary, highlighting how wind energy has sent energy costs spiralling. Let's just have a listen to the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, talking about cutting costs just a month ago.
I'm trying to get lots of new ways that we can power our country, like solar power, wind power. What's good about that is it's good for tackling climate change because you're not burning fossil fuels, which is what helps cause climate change, but also you can get cheaper energy bills for people. Yeah. So you're trying to do both of those things together. You're trying to make things better now, and you're trying to protect against climate change.
That's Ed Miliband addressing an audience of what look like 6-year-olds.
Yeah, I have to admit...
Who were thinking, who the hell is this man that's going to our school?
Exactly, they're probably smarter than he is at this point.
I think so.
When we look at the state of this stuff, it's absolutely... I often comment that he's probably one of the biggest national security risks we face as a country because of the decimation of our energy security policy. It is absolutely extraordinary. I always find it funny that we have a cap and it just keeps going up.
Yes.
That has never made an ounce of sense to me.
Can we just lose the word cap?
Yeah.
Because every time I hear it, I'm misled into believing that the cap is something that instinctively we reach for to describe something that's going to stop something going up.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. When it was brought in, it was just an election kind of gift offer. It was a silly little policy. But, again, these things that they get stuck with governments because nobody wants to get rid of them because you then get all the negative bits. But I have to admit, when we look at the net zero policy, it has always been this kind of run hell for leather and just keep going, whatever happens. And, the consequences be gone with. But it is really important now that we start to realise that this is actually having not just an economic effect, it's having having a social effect where it is absolutely decimating this country. We will never have growth at this level of energy.
Yeah.
Like every civilization in history has never grown when its energy prices or energy kind of manufacturing is this expensive.
Correct.
It is absolutely astonishing to me that this government doesn't get it. But yet again, it's interesting. Within the Labour Party, there is this growing little group of the net zeroers. You know, they're becoming very powerful. It's got Sadiq Khan, Andy Burnham, Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband. You know, these are big figures playing within the Labour Party. And this stuff is now starting to be more politics. And it's, yet again, it's the taxpayer and, you know, the average man on the street that's paying the price for it. And it is quite the price these days.
I think this is, you're right, Peter, when you said about it being politics. It's the ultimate go-to for left-wing thinkers.
Yes.
Because in order to, and I really believe it's as simple as, I've said it for years, in order to be kind of left-wing, you've got to believe you have a kind of moral superiority on things, and you have to have an enemy. And the old Labour argument of working class Labour has sort of been lost in the ether over the years. Blair kind of sorted that out, and it's never gone back, rightly so, to the old sort of industrial core of what it sort of stood for once upon a time. So what better totemic thing to have as your symbol of your northern star of all things to argue against than the destruction of planet Earth, and it's all down to humans. So it's the ultimate socialist statement.
It really is, but I find it fascinating how it has become a religion. You know, it has its got its apostles, it's got its martyrs, it's got its you know, its pageantry and all, you know, and all the catastrophizing and everything that goes into it. It has really, I think it was Carl Jung that said, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And net zero is a prime example of it.
Yes.
You know, you could get rid of Ed Miliband all you like, but there are other people within our establishment, within the system, that will continue to push this forward. You know, we can't just keep blaming one person, because we have a tendency to do this, and net zero is a prime example of simple solutions to complex problems, and we have to stop doing that. But I will say that, you know, the Conservatives did bring in a lot of this net zero stuff, but
Boris Johnson loved it.
Oh, I tell you now, the green agenda under Boris Johnson was the downfall of the Conservatives. I do not understand this dogma that they thought that everybody would love them if they all suddenly started planting trees everywhere and all that kind of stuff. It is ridiculous. They confused people's concern for environmental kind of protection with net zero. Those are two very different policy strands. So people want conservation, they want animal welfare, they want stuff like that. That's not net zero. Net zero has become the green agenda, and it kind of hijacked into it in the language, and people deliberately kind of infected into what was important work in conservation and things like that. But this net zero stuff, we've got to scrap it. We have decades of energy under our feet, and we refuse to do it because of a newt or some bat somewhere. And you know, I think it was HS2 was delayed, and it cost us billions because of a bat colony that was like 3 or 4 miles away from where it was going to be. It is the ridiculous stuff that is all wrapped up within this kind of net zero argument, because it's become a catch-all. You know, like you say, it's net zero, saving the planet. Who's going to argue against saving the planet? You know, and unfortunately, as per usual, the left overplayed its hand, and again, it's just astronomical amounts of money. I cannot believe it's £1,755 is the average.
It's the average bill. And I mean, for many people getting in touch with us, you know, theirs is much more than that. I was talking to somebody who's building a house, and they had the planning people round from the local council. And the house is very sort of fairly subtle house. It's kind of just replacing the one that was already there, which was dilapidated and, you know, ready to go. So rebuilding a house in order to, you know, either rent it out or sell it on, whatever. And the woman came around from the council, and she whipped out a big old tape measure. You know those sporting tape measures that used to be on a big spool? You know, where they've measured long jumps and things like that. Well, one of these things. And she's going around the guy, and he's thinking, well, why is she measuring the borders, and what's she doing there? And she was trying to get the proportionality of the building versus the garden. Right now, okay, you can't just stick a building in every garden. You've got to have some shrubbery, a bit of plumage. You know, you've got to have some, got a little bit of that. But actually what she told him was, if it didn't reach the criteria, he said, well, what do I do then? You know, I don't really want to build a smaller house. It's not that big anyway. And she said, oh, you have to buy a bit of land
Casually.
What?
Yeah.
So, there's a field over there. Most local authorities now have one. Whereas if you don't hit the criteria, they make it a bit like planting a tree if you fly too much. So you've got to buy a bit of land.
Yeah,
so you've got to buy like 4 foot square of land.
Yeah, it's called carbon offsetting.
1,200 quid or something.
Yeah, they've been at this for quite
So
some
it's essentially
time.
just a fine.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. We will never move on as a country unless we actually reform the planning regulations here. It is absolutely, again, beyond stupid that we have so many like kind of hoops to jump through and red tape for the sake of red tape. It is the noose around this country's neck is the planning system, because a lot of this stuff is slowed down, as you said about improving the grid, because the grid is terrible. It is falling apart. Let's not forget, not too long ago we were very, very close to blackouts, and we had the threat of rolling blackouts at one point, if we remember. But you know, we can't build anything because of the regulations, and then because of, you know, local protests that don't want pylons everywhere, and you know, it is an absolute mess, and it is all of each party's own making. You know, nobody is serious on this issue, and you know, you can be against net zero all you like, but you've got to start coming to the table with how we're going to fix this now, because I'm getting a little sick and tired of pointing at things and going, that's terrible. Great, we can all do that. You know, you want to be the leaders of the country, fix something. Yeah, and Ed Miliband is a Maliband. That's something, that's right.
Well, there you go.
Ed Miliband, him, the chief wizard of the archdeacon of this entire project. And of course, if you challenge on this, then these people are quite relaxed about the challenge, because you go, you know, oh, it's going to cost me £2,000 a year to heat my house, and they say, but the planet's dying. Yeah. So it's almost like they're constantly punching up. They're constantly the catch-all answer is, so what's more important? Yeah, exactly. You know, the fact you've got to turn a radiator off, or saving the planet. The favourite is always, but you think of the world you're leaving for your kids. That kind of won't somebody think of the children narrative? Do you know, was it Ronald Reagan that says one of the most dangerous phrases is, I'm from the government and here to help? Won't somebody think of the children is equally as dangerous as politics. Up there as well, isn't it? Yeah, because we saw it with the Online Safety Act as well. It's this kind of catch-all stuff that the left employs to shut down a debate. Completely. Peter Barnes is with us. We're looking at the big stories of the day. More to come. And, of course, comments from you as well. 0344 499 1000. Also want to hear from you if you're a landlord as well on that specific issue of a potential national insurance being added to the rent you charge, so they can essentially just tax you out of your pants a little bit more for having the audacity to own another house. It might even be your business. They don't really care. You're a landlord, therefore you're an enemy. Thoughts on that? And what is the answer to the UK energy bill crisis? Everything you need to know on that number, 0344 499 1000. Drop us a voice note there as well, and of course you can message us on 87222. We're back just after this.
Moving 200 people to Rwanda wasn't going to stop people getting on boats.
It was going to be a significant impact in terms of people knowing that they would be refused entry on a permanent basis to the UK. We spend a lot of money on it. Julia, I served on the committee. I was in Parliament. I know the
250 people.
It was
250 people being sent to Rwanda was not going to deter 28,000 people arriving.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one in from Sarah in West Sussex. Renewables. Those customers who chose Renewables should pay all associated costs. Why should any of us pay for someone else's smug virtue signalling? Be interesting if they could charge in that kind of way. That would be fascinating. On landlords, Janice says, does this landlord raid include council housing, or are they going to be exempt? Labour's greed rumbles on. Well, council housing, interestingly, because the government are the biggest landlord in that respect, and I'm sure you know this, Peter Barnes is still with us, of course, are exempt from quite a lot of the rules and regulations around. Yeah. I mean, all the stuff you've got to do to get to a C rating in your house. I mean, nobody wants to rent out a house without a roof or smashed windows, It's ridiculous. But to get to this new C rating by 2030 or whatever it is, I mean, you could have to spend £20,000-30,000 on your house to get. I mean, but it's if you wanted to buy the house, you don't have to do that.
Do people still buy houses? Is that still a thing?
A bloke in Rill bought one last week.
Oh, just one.
Bit of breaking news.
Yeah, you wonder why the economy is in the garbage.
Indeed. We'll come back to that. Let's look at landlords then. Chancellor Rachel Reeves weighing up this national insurance on landlords' rental income to help plug the $50 billion black hole. And this is just another nail in the coffin of landlords.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. What I really find quite annoying is that this is argued. It was introduced originally by the Resolute Foundation, so anything that they've got their name to, run away from immediately because it's going to cost you a fortune, just as a solid rule. But what I will say is they keep saying that it's passive income. Do you know, in other words, landlords don't do anything. I think that is the most preposterous idea I've ever heard. Given the loops they have to run through, the ones we're about to add to them under the renters bill, which is going to decimate the rental economy. Destocking, as they call it, like the number of people selling up and just not renting out their houses, is a major problem, and it's going to be a huge one here in London in particular. You know, we're already seeing a decrease in the number of rooms available, and we're also seeing landlords be a lot more strict on who they're renting to.
True.
So they, you have to have a lot more kind of references and credit ratings and all this kind of stuff because of the extra costs that they're going to have to endure. It's a real problem. But they are one about kind of replacing stamp duty as well. I think they want to narrow capital gains. This is basically because Rachel Reeves has blown up the economy. She has zero economic credibility, and she is only in place because the city is terrified of Prime Minister Angela Rayner and her merry band of warriors and the decimation they're going to inflict even more damage on the economy. It is a well-known fact in the city now that the government is held together by the city because they don't want Angela Rayner.
Yeah, isn't that an extraordinary situation?
Just over a year in.
Just over a year in, yes, that's right. Another 4 to go,
Yeah, no, I have to keep reminding people of that, and then they tell me not to.
Just a year in. Seems like a decade they've been there, doesn't it? Let's move to this story. Peter Keir Starmer could end the use of controversial migrant hotels within the next 6 months if he offered a blanket amnesty to asylum seekers from a handful of countries. Well, you know it's got that bad. I mean, you know it's really got bad when Rylan off the telly, who presents this morning, gets involved in the argument and says something so goddamn sensible and completely logical. Nobody could argue with it. I'm sure a few left-wing meerkats who watch ITV during the day got very, very discombobulated. But let's have a listen to what Rylan Clark said on This Morning.
I find it absolutely insane that all these people, one, are risking their lives coming across the channel like that they are, but two, when they get here, it does seem, and I think this is why a lot of Labour voters as well are now sitting there going, there's something wrong here. It seems, welcome, come on in. This is the narrative we're being fed.
Yeah.
Here's the hotel. Here's the phones. Here's the iPad. Here's the NHS in reception of your hotel. Here's 3 meals a day. Here's a games room in the hotel. Have a lovely time and welcome. And then there's people that have lived here all their lives that are struggling.
Yeah.
They're homeless. Let's not even discuss our homeless. There are people living on the streets, veterans, all of this.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't me getting on my soapbox, because let me be honest, everyone's going to have an opinion about this and you're going to upset someone some which way. I believe that something major needs to be done about this.
Pretty logical stuff.
I mean, that's
some people have condemned him for that. By the way,
I don't know who the gentleman in the red was, but he looked like he was about to blow a gasket.
That was his mum, Linda, I think.
Oh my God, it was ridiculous. That's the most sensible thing.
He looked like. Oh my God, is this really being said on the telly?
Exactly. I find it fascinating that what is a very common sense approach is treated by these people as some kind of scarlet letter greatest sin ever. But I've said from day one that an amnesty was coming. It's about 33,000 people they want to give temporary permanent leave to, which I don't understand how you can have temporary and permanent in the same sentence, which doesn't make any sense to me. But it's from the top holiday destinations as well. So you've got Afghanistan, Eritrea, Iran, Sudan and Syria. So, you know, all the safe countries where, you know, there's no problems of any sort
Great
whatsoever.
for backpackers.
We don't know who these people are. Come on in, stay here. We'll put you next to a school, and I'm sure everything will be perfectly fine. The refugee councillor who has proposed this it's stupidity, but it is yet again the lack of self-awareness, and is that halo polishing idea and that kind of, well, we're the morally good ones. We always have good ideas. It is just ridiculous. We've been saying this was coming. It is laying the groundwork, because the Labour Party are going to play games with this, because they'll say we shut the hotels. All they did was they moved them into private accommodation. Yeah. They didn't get rid of the people that are here, which is what people want to do. And it's the games that the Labour play with the wording, and I think the public have caught on to it. I really do, and I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble over this, because, again, it is, with the Epping hotel situation and all these kind of migrant hotel protests, it's not going away like the government wishes it would.
No, it's not.
And because these are very well-regulated protests, and they're good at the PR game, they can't just write them off either.
And it's kind of toyed with the kind of status quo groupthink belief that the major parties have on things like migration. I bet there was a point in Number 10 where somebody said, "So Keir Starmer, don't worry about this. It's niche stuff. It's just a small group of people.
Small group of people.
They'll go away soon." And then you look at the opinion polls of voting intentions at the next election and who's likely to be in Number 10, and you realise this is much more than a niche thing. Yeah. There's a blanket sense of not just resentment, but jaw-dropping, a shock at what is happening to our country. And implemented by the very people we put into office.
And more importantly, the people who are in office are saying it's not happening. They're not just lying to you, they're gaslighting you. They're saying the things you're seeing, your changing community, your changing neighbourhood, the fact you can't get a GP appointment or a dentist appointment, the schools are full, we're losing money economically, and the economic impact is significant. We're being told that isn't happening. I think that is the despicable bit. You know, it is not just getting up and lying. It is saying what you're feeling isn't real and you're bad for feeling it. Yeah. That you're a racist, all these words that they throw at you now, which are completely meaningless, because, I think everyone's been Hitler since about 2008.
Yes, of course.
I think I've been called it so many times now. I think, it's rather ridiculous. But it's very telling that when these stories all start to come to the forefront, it's the public found out. The way this has been managed by successive governments is super injunctions. Do it quietly. Don't tell the public. So now it is out of control because it is a dump of information and everybody is outraged over it.
And just to give you an idea, Peter, as a final point on this, the appeal against the closure of the Bell Hotel in Epping, or the closure for use of housing migrants. The appeal is underway, so the Home Office are challenging this. And the headline that has come out of that from just this morning, this is fairly fresh news: the rights of asylum seekers are more important than those of Epping Council. and therefore the residents of Epping, according to Home Office lawyers. Making submissions to the Court of Appeal on behalf of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, lawyers said the relevant public interests in play are not equal and are fundamentally different in nature, which downplays people's concern. They're at it again.
Yeah.
Yet again.
Do you know what that proves?
Go on.
Two-tier society. They've literally just argued for two-tier. The
Yes.
government lawyers, on behalf of the Home Secretary, has confirmed two-tier.
Correct.
There is no way anybody can say it doesn't exist now because a government lawyer has used it.
They've not
in a
even
case.
said it under the
They've
light
not
of a
even tried
silvery
to-
moon.
yeah,
This is broad
exactly.
daylight
Yeah.
in a courtroom
Yeah,
that we can all
exactly.
report on.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Unbelievable.
But again, it's the arrogance of this government.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Listen, Peter, we have to stop there. Great to see you.
You too.
We will
Yeah,
see you
thanks
again
for
very
having me.
soon. Peter Barnes with us on the programme, political strategist, and always great to get his views on these things. Your views and opinions on the way, 0344 499 1000. Couple of subjects up and running. If you're in the landlord industry, what are your senses of what is happening with this? So they're kind of floated. The government do this. They come up with an idea and they will put it out there and see how people digest it. And of course, nobody has sympathy with landlords because people have a certain stereotypical view of landlords, but they could be crushed again with a national insurance requirement on rents, for God's sake. And the big question as well, what is the answer to the UK's energy bill crisis? Either of those subjects and anything else you'd like to throw into the mix, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes from Tom, who says Ian, renewables currently are not a viable or economic option for energy generation in this country when they need a 65% subsidy from the taxpayer. Please watch the Sky Australian documentary, The Real Cost of Net Zero, on YouTube as to how Australia won't meet the need to be 100% renewable by 2030 due to mountainous costs, and their climate is more suitable for renewables. So it does depend what state you're in, but I take the point. Tom, thank you for that great message from him. This, of course, is all around Ed Miliband's, what's being called Ed Miliband's lunacy, being blamed for a shock rise in energy bills this winter. This is Ofgem, so they're completely independent of anything. It's not that they have an opinion or a dog in the race in the sense of needing to take a political stance on these things, but they've said the increase in costs has been pushed up to double the rate predicted. Households will pay more to switch off wind turbines at times when they are generating too much power, as well as funding gas plants to help step in when the wind is not blowing enough. Yeah, we have a problem here. We'll talk to Donica McCarthy in a few moments. But first, Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Andy, good afternoon to you. I'm trying to work this one out. I'm trying to imagine if I sort of gave this conundrum to my 7-year-old. And the question was, so what would you do with the windmill? So when it's going too fast, you turn it off. When you turn it off, there's a problem because something else has to step in. I think the answer might be, do we need the windmill?
So it's a really tricky one, because it's not the wind farm's fault per se that they responded to the incentives the government gave them, which did include paying them for when the energy couldn't be used when they were available. So what we're seeing here is the very unethical consequences of a very bad policy. But it's a policy that's come from politicians like Ed Miliband. So it is incumbent on him and his colleagues to try and fix it, which they're showing no sign of doing. I mean, there's an enormous debate even within the wind industry between people who think this should continue because they're doing very well out of it, and people who think we should move to a system where there's much less likely to be used in this way, for example, using regional or local pricing. But all the same, it's not a good system, because what the politicians have done is what we want to see is loads and loads of wind turbines, because then we can go to international conferences and we tell all our mates how incredibly green we are and how we're leading the world in net zero, which doesn't matter at all for the British people, other than very obliquely if they have an ambition to do something about the world in 100 years' time. So having done that, that's what we're getting. And the consequences of that, which weren't built into the policy, are that we're running two different energy systems that are not really compatible. So the old energy system, where we have giant generators like nuclear power stations and gas generators, and we have the new energy system, which is lots of fiddly little things like solar farms, wind farms, and then micro generation in local areas. And one of those things is reliable and the other is weather dependent. And you try and cobble those two things together and you incur vast costs. So costs of connecting these things to an expanded national grid. That isn't built into the policy. The cost of balancing these things so you avoid what happened in Spain earlier this year where all the lights went out, that wasn't built into the policy. The costs of compensating people through additional welfare payments because their energy bills are as a consequence higher, but that wasn't built into the policy. So all of those things are piling on top of each other, along with the need to have this second energy system of gas operating in the background inefficiently, in order to be there when the wind isn't blowing. And this is how we've ended up with some of the most expensive energy prices in the world. So It's not really a wind turbine problem. It's a daft politicians demanding to lead the world in wind turbines that has caused this.
So there's some sort of vainglorious kind of ego construction going on in all of this. That's often said about people and pet projects. Of course, the overarching answer, Andy, would be, well, they're saving the planet. So, you know, you can bang on, or I can bang on about all sorts of contradictory ideas. They're trying to save the world, Andy.
Which is the tired old argument that we've heard for generations about a range of different issues. Now, the truth of the matter is that carbon emissions do cause global warming, and global warming is a serious problem that does need to be tackled. And in the long term, we will tackle it because there will be alternatives to fossil fuels that are affordable. That is not where we are today. Yeah. It's like arguing that space travel would be a very nice thing, but we shouldn't care about the cost of rocket ships that don't yet exist. And that's what we've got. We've got a renewable energy system that just does not work. And to get to the one that might, you need a lot of nuclear power to provide reliable power, which is also low carbon, and much less renewables in an appropriately balanced grid that actually then works, and then very little gas. But you can't get from where we are now to there quickly. And if everybody in the world tries to do the same thing at once, the price of absolutely everything goes up in energy. And if the price of energy goes up, the price of everything else goes up. So you ended up in this doom loop, politicians trying to force the future upon us, and all they're doing is raising prices.
It does seem to be the case. I can't think of the last time I read about prices going down. I know that much. Listen, Andy, thank you for your time, sir. Andy Mayer is energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Thank you to him. Let's get a word on this from Donica McCarthy, director of the Climate Media Coalition. Afternoon to you, Donica. We've spoken so many times over the years. I know you love a windmill, you love a wind farm, all the rest of it. And here it is today. Your fox has been well and truly shot. They don't really work properly, and they're putting people's energy bills up. Do you want to apologise to the nation now?
I think what we should apologise is what we just heard from the Institute of Economic Affairs. They refuse to reveal who funds them, and Greenpeace revealed that they're actually funded by oil companies. So what the oil companies have done is they've funded secret think tanks to pump out lies about renewable energy and about nuclear power. Let's face it.
What's the lie, Donica?
He just talked about actually that renewable energy is not delivering, it's not feasible, it's not cheaper. In the United Kingdom, per megawatt, nuclear is £120 per megawatt, and wind energy is around £42-43 per megawatt. What is happening today, Ian, is an extraordinary scandal that many media people miss. Did you realise the National Grid is a privatised corporation?
Yep.
Now, they make around £4 to £5 billion a year to build and maintain our national grid. And what they have done is they've pocketed the money and put the costs onto consumers over the last 10 years. As big a scandal as the oil industry. Because what should have happened over the last 10 years, they should have built the grid so when the wind farms come online and the solar farms come online, as they knew they were coming, as we have invested in, as private companies have invested to build them, they should have been there, and they're not there. What have they done? They're pocketing the profits, the huge profits from cheaper green energy, £90 per customer, and they're passing on the cost of £15 to pay the wind farms not to produce when there's too much. What should have happened, they should have built the grid, and they failed. And the Labour government Miliband is trying to address that by speeding up 2 huge cables coming from Scotland down to England, which will be in place within around 3 or 4 years. He's speeding that up, and it's the right thing to do. And what we need to do is to tackle this failed privatised utility company.
Well, we've still got a privatised Great British Energy as a private element to it, because it's private corporations or companies that will be financing it, of course. So, and of course, a great deal of taxpayer money. Isn't the overarching question here, Donica, that the net zero project is too fast, too soon, and too expensive? Nobody says, look, why don't we have... Hang on, let me just finish the point. If we had a parallel... If somebody said, look, this is cleaner energy, whether it's solar panels or wind farms, and it works brilliantly and it's more efficient, I don't know anybody that would say, don't do it. Of course it would be better, but we're not ready for it. We can't afford it at the moment. We don't need to go at this speed.
Ian, I beg your viewers to go onto the Department of Energy website and see what the price of various energies are. The Institute of Economic Affairs just lied through their teeth to you. And why are you spouting the lies? It is cheaper. Green electricity is already cheaper in the UK. We have some heritage funding from around 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we did have to subsidise it. No wind farm that got a contract in the last 5 years is getting any subsidy. What we are having to pay for is because of the failure of this privatised utility to build the infrastructure that was needed. And who are they?
But we're turning them off when there's too much wind. And then when there's not enough, we have to turn to alternative. So it's invariable, isn't it? And then that's the problem.
I'll explain to you why. There's 2 reasons why we have to pay to them to turn off sometimes. One is because we didn't build any storage, and second, we didn't build the cables. Rather than building the cables, National Grid pocketed £5 billion every year for the last 10 years. It's an utter scandal, and you and I are paying for it, and poor people across Britain are paying for it. But as regards today's announcement, thankfully, it's a 2% rise in electricity prices, which is thankfully below inflation. So it's a de facto cut.
But they're already through. There's nowhere else on the planet, no first world country that has energy bills like ours. And you can't dismiss Ed Miliband's evangelism on all of this, Donica. I know you sing from a similar hymn sheet on this. It's not the full catch-all answer to everything, just build windmills. You know, we've got to survive with the 21st century.
He's not actually building only wind turbines. He's actually building cables and storage, which is what they will do to bring it down. And actually, what we actually need to face is that we are looking at cheaper bills if the private companies stopped ripping us off.
Well, Ed Miliband can do something about that. He's literally the Secretary of State for this area.
On many things, the Daily Mail and I disagree on, but the one thing we do agree on is we've got to stop allowing our electricity bills, prices being set by the most expensive electricity, which is nuclear and fossil fuels. And that's the crazy thing about Farage and Reform. They want to trash the cheapest and bring in the most expensive, which is...
But the cheapest doesn't mean it's the best, does it? That's one of the problems here. It doesn't mean that it's the most reliable.
Well, the reliability can be dealt with storage. We're absolutely now ramping it up. Under Miliband, we're ramping up storage. My house has solar panels. For 30 years, I had to buy electricity at night time for 20 years, I had to buy it at night time when the sun didn't shine in Camberwell. Since last February, I have got batteries. I haven't had to buy a single kilowatt of electricity in Camberwell at night time, even the sun isn't shining, because I have solar power stored in my battery. That's what we need to do nationally. And the interesting thing is the cost has collapsed over the last 10 years, Ian. The cost of storage per megawatt hour is £91. The cost of gas electricity is £113. The cost of nuclear is £120. Even storage is cheaper than fossil fuels and nuclear. And I think what we need to do is to have a law that actually all our think tanks should declare their funding. Ed, we should not have people like Andy Marr coming on the show and we don't know who funds them. It's outrageous.
On that point, Donica, thank you very much indeed for your time. Donica McCarthy, it's outrageous what our previous guest said he believes, because we don't know who funds him. I always find it slightly skew-if when people suggest that those that have an expertise in a certain area will only spout almost a pre-scripted line because they are funded by X, Y and Z. It's quite hard for a human being to just completely lie consistently, daily, on the hour, every hour. It's almost impossible. It's just possible, however, that Andy Mayer completely believes what he said, and there are other like-minded, there might be corporations that have an in on it. I never buy into that one unless we know who funds you, therefore you're an unreliable witness. I think he fundamentally disagrees. And what I extrapolate from that, listening to Donica McCarthy more than anything, is nobody is against an alternative form of energy. What people are against is the clear evangelism that is attached to it. And by the way, if he wants to talk about those with vested interests, have a look at Ed Miliband and the team around him. These are the old Corbynites. I think there was one advisor that dared to say, oh, this might cost taxpayers too much money, and she was told to walk the plank. But everybody else is that kind of hard left, kind of Marxist thinking advisor character. I'd say they are people with a skewed vested interest view, politically or otherwise. So yeah, if you've got a system that's going to work better, then we'd all embrace it. But we have a real sense. All this stuff is a bit like Bluetooth. You know, Bluetooth is still not fully there, right? You know, we've all managed to kind of almost insert our phone into that Bluetooth speaker when it tells you to please put it close to the device. And you think, is this thing going to bloody well? How much does it? How close does it have to be? Because it's not quite there yet. And I think the same with all of this. Bring it on, maybe. 50 years' time, have your windmills and your panels. We've got it sorted out. And by then, by the way, we might discover an entire new source of energy. But the rush is clearly costing consumers. The clear rush, the religious race to this, added to which the ego of politicians who want to put their hand up at those intergovernmental conferences and go, yeah, we did it first, we got more wheels than you, therefore we're greener, therefore we're better. And that, boys and girls, is what it's all about. 0344 499 1000. Lines are open on that. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Terry in Slough, who says anyone with an ounce of common sense can see this idiotic rush to net zero will be disastrous for this country, but there seems to be a lack of common sense in this useless, incompetent Labour government, says Terry in Slough. Do you know the best example of how to do net zero is China, oddly, because whilst China are polluting half the planet with God knows how many coal furnaces and burning all sorts of guff and gunk into the atmosphere on a minute-by-minute basis. Simultaneously, they've got more solar panels and windmills than anywhere else on planet Earth. And they're of course a big place, and it's essentially a communist dictatorship, so they can make things happen. But what they're essentially doing is saying we're not going to cut off our nose to spite our face. We've got stuff here that we're going to use up. And in the meantime, we'll have a parallel system nicely running in the background, and maybe one day that will take over. But until it does, we're not going to ignore what's in front of us and what's cheaper for us as well. Let's go to Anne in Sussex on this interesting issue of Ed Miliband and the increasing problem of rising bills. Anne, what are you making of it all? Good afternoon.
Well, it's not incompetence, it's not a cock-up, it's all deliberate. And the first thing to control people is to create a climate of fear. And if you say, without climate control, the world is going to hell on a handcart, and look, everything is dying, and it's all our fault. That's a big step to getting the way that this government has gone, and maybe other governments before them, which is costing us very dearly as a nation, everything that you've discussed. But if I just say a couple of things to you, gain control of all student newspapers, use student riots to form public protests against programs or organisations, infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion, discredit the Bible, etc. Gain control, support any socialist movement to give centralised control over any part of culture or education, gain control of all the student newspapers, use student riots, get control of the schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism. It goes on and on. There are 45 of these that were written in the early 1960s, which actually were the 45 goals of communism. And as I went through them, you think, well, they've been doing that. Separate children from their parents because parents are indoctrinating. It says a fundamental communist goal to separate children from parents, to raise a generation of loyal communists, it says on the end.
Wow.
Emphasise the need, discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce, dominate the psychiatric profession, and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist controls, transfer some of the powers of arrest from police to social agencies, infiltrate and gain control of big business, infiltrate and gain control of the unions, belittle any forms of culture, and discourage the teaching. On this one it says American history, but you can say the same here. Honestly, if people read this, you think, no, I don't believe this is going to happen. They didn't in the 60s.
Yeah, but you think that's we're kind of there now?
We've arrived, and we've arrived sleepwalking into this. And the reason the UK is very important because we have given the world a lot. We're not the awful country. People say we are. And I want our flag shown everywhere. I don't want... I'm not a right-winger, whatever that is, but we should be proud of what we have done in the past. We'd be proud of our history because we've been a country that people have come to be safe for hundreds of years.
You're speaking common sense, Anne. I have to move, but thank you for being our first caller on that. Chris in Epsom will be with you on the other side of the news. Stephen says, good afternoon, Ian. I'm perplexed. How can a government be this bad on purpose? Who is pulling the strings? You do kind of wonder. This in from Tom in Birmingham. Renewables currently are not a viable or economic option for energy generation in this country when they need 65% subsidy from the taxpayer. That's a very good point. Yeah, I think I may have read that one earlier about watching the documentary on Sky Australia on the real cost of net zero. I will check it out. Reg says, this is reference landlords, I inherited a property which I can't sell because no one can afford to get a mortgage at the minute. I can't leave it empty because they want to charge me double on community charge, and if I rent it out, I also have to pay every penny I make on tax, and now they want to charge me national insurance. I might as well give the keys to the bank and say, you get on with it. Just give it to the government and go, do you know what? You've made this entire industry. Why are we apologising for having a landlord private rental sector industry? It's perfectly logical stuff. It's also, by the way, spoiler alert for this government, Angela Rayner, take note, it's propping up the housing crisis in this country. Thoughts on that if you are a landlord? We'll talk more on the other side of the news. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the headlines now at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Loads together. We are, of course, talking about Ed Miliband's net zero policy. The lunacy, it's being described, blamed for the shock rise in energy bills this winter. Are these things ever going to go down in price? I mean, it'd just be nice, wouldn't it, to get a memo from somebody, Energy HQ, to say, oh, by the way, we're halving the cost of heating your house. You might be wishing for that for a long time. Ofgem are confirming wind farms are actually driving costs up. That was refuted by a previous guest. Also this afternoon, a terrorist from the ISIS beheading gang dubbed the Beatles has sparked fury after applying to return to the UK. Victims' families calling it outrageous and an insult that could give him cushy treatment inside a British jail. We'll talk to one man who's been looking at this story in just a couple of moments. And Chancellor Rachel Reeves is plotting a tax raid on landlords. They love a pop at a landlord, don't they, over there at number 10 in the Treasury, with plans to apply national insurance to rental income to help plug a £50 billion black hole in public finances. The government will go, no, this is not a policy. This is where they put an idea out there. They kind of do the litmus test, see how it's looking, and then come the budget, it's either in or it's not. We'll have more on that. And, of course, crucially, your comments along the way. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. You can leave a voice note there as well or message us on 87222. This one from Steve, who says, in relation to the illegal migrants arriving on our shores via small boats, which appear to not be so small, when Keir Starmer expressed the need to smash the gang, surely he must be referring to his own kind, which are the sort of left-wing lawyers aiding and abetting the illegal migration movement by using the most unbelievable reasons to meet the bizarre criteria for migrants to claim asylum, says Steve in Leamington Spa. And there's been a whole range, hasn't there, of stories of there was the chicken nugget story. There was another one who's, I think some bloke had the wrong coloured hair, that if he went back to his home country, he might be attacked because people might think he's trans, or just some other absolute a wheelbarrow and a skip full of nonsense, I think we can safely say. So let's move to this story. The terrorists from ISIS beheading gang, dubbed the Beatles, has sparked fury after applying to return to the UK. It's being called an insult by victims' families. El Shafi El Sheikh, I think I've got that correct, we'll confirm that in a moment, known as Jihadi Ringo, has applied to transfer from a high-security US prison, but there are fears he could receive better treatment in the UK. His gang filmed the killings of hostages, including, you may remember, the aid worker David Haynes. He was born in Sudan, by the way, grew up in London, but has had his British citizenship revoked since 2018. I can't really see how this man's got any right to claim that he should be moved to this country. One man who's been reporting on this, very respected journalist, senior reporter at The Sun, Michael Hamilton, is with us. Good to see you, Michael.
Good afternoon.
I mean, this Beatles group, so there were 4 of them who carried out the most horrendous, barbaric attacks. What's the bigger story behind them? And one, at least, is dead. Are the other 2 dead as well as this guy?
So, yeah, they were 4 jihadists from London, all travelled out to fight for IS.
Yep.
The leader was known as Jihadi John, Mohammed Mwazi. He is dead, was killed in a drone strike. The other 3 are all in jail.
Right. And this fella, El Shafi El Sheikh?
Yes,
is that
that's
right?
Yeah.
He wants to come over here, so he's in a US jail, where I'd imagine it's pretty grim.
He's in a very tough jail, 23 hours a day in his cell.
Wow.
No mixing with other humans, basically. Just sees staff, counsellors, that's it. It's there to stop people escaping and for punishment that he wants to come over here.
You'd think, I often wonder this, when it comes to people whose crimes, in this case, these are all people who carried out horrendous crimes, but did so in the name of their faith. You know, they believed, I know it's not the same version of their faith that others would believe, but that's how they would dub it. I did this for God, I did it for, you know, essentially my guiding light in life. You'd think that when it comes to serving time in jail, they would also take the same kind of theological kind of line that, you know, I don't mind being here because this is God's work and I'm still part of it. I'm a martyr almost, albeit in life.
The fear is that El Sheikh wants to come over here to have cushier conditions. The greater fear is that if he comes to somewhere like Belmarsh, he'd be able to mix with other jihadists.
Of course.
If he behaved, he'd be placed in softer conditions than he would be in the US, and could be able to mix with, speak to, influence, radicalise others.
Do we know specifically what this one of the 4 did, what his actual offence that led to jail time was?
He was part of the gang. The 4 of them, abducted David Haynes in 2013. They held him, tortured him, waterboarded him, starved him. El Sheikh, Jihadi Ringo, was one of the ringleaders of that. Jihadi John Mwazi was the executioner, but El Sheikh, Jihadi Ringo, was a key member of this gang. He was found guilty by a federal jury in the States, serving 8 life sentences, so was a very serious, heavy-duty terrorist.
I mean, this is the most barbaric. This is just awful, isn't it? I mean, there's no other way to... There's no mitigating circumstances around this one. I can't imagine what a defence lawyer said in court. This is just horrendous and awful, and you wonder, you know, at what point would somebody, or even a legal team, think that it was reasonable to try and, you know, essentially get their client transferred, I suppose, for want of a better phrase, to somewhere better? That would be the thinking.
Well, they were also targeting aid workers. So David Haynes was handing out humanitarian aid to displaced persons in Syria after the civil war. So it's hard to argue, you know, any rationale or logic behind what happened to him.
Yes, you couldn't even sort of, tenuous as it still might be, you couldn't even argue that it was, this is just sort of one person's ideology against another's. This was an aid worker.
Yeah, an aid worker. Some of the American victims were journalists. And the family's fear is that, as I say, if they do go to Belmarsh, it's going to compare very favourably for him to his life now.
Yeah, of course. His British citizenship was revoked in 2018, so it doesn't sound as if there's any kind of, he's got any legal case to come here.
Well, the US Department for Justice papers describe the UK as his home country, so they see him as a British citizen.
Right.
And what the fear is that obviously with Donald Trump's hardline government, that if they negotiate with our authorities, then they may have the upper hand in that.
I mean, could he not go back to Sudan?
Well, he hasn't applied to go back to Sudan, and I don't think that such an application is likely.
No, I don't imagine he wants to go to Sudan. But could we not say, well, look, he's not a British citizen, we don't want him here. He's got no right to be here. He's a horrendous character. So, yeah, I mean, we've got no grounds to take him. But like you say, if we carve out a deal with America, might not be specifically for him, but he comes within the remit of that deal, then...
The Ministry of Justice have said we can refuse this application and any others. So they can say no, but if that happens, he stays in the States. The Sudan move sort of isn't on the table.
We don't seem to get... I was just thinking when you said that there, you can imagine if Donald Trump was asked at a press conference what he thought of this guy. You would get bells and whistles of, absolute condemnation and very sort of politically graphic description of what Trump thought of someone like this. Whereas over here we get a sort of nicely worded press statement from the Department of Justice. You always want to hear the Prime Minister stand up and say, this piece of work is never, ever coming back to this, not on my watch. But we don't get that sort of same passionate, unequivocal riposte from our lot.
No, I think David Haynes' daughter would like to see that and like to hear that.
Yeah, I'm
If
sure.
the Justice Secretary said, not on my watch, over my dead body, he's not coming back here, we don't want him, I think that would be what she wants to hear.
I would have thought so.
Why we've raised it and why she's spoken to us about it.
Is there a time frame on any of this?
Yeah, so they put out that, the US Department of Justice put out that notice on August the 12th. And it's 30 days from then that they then decide what to do next. So they then could decide to apply for the move, or could decide that the victims don't want the move, so they could shelve the application.
We'll watch with interest. I know you're keeping up reporting on this as well. Michael, great to see you. Thank you for coming in. Michael Hamilton, senior reporter over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. Back to you. Lots more to talk about here. 0344 499 1000. If you want to pick up on that specific story, totally fine with us. We can take some comment on that as well. We are talking net zero, Ed Miliband and all that goes with that. And, of course, landlords on the agenda as well. Back to Ed and the net zero experiment. Chris is in Epsom. What have you got for us, Chris? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. It's been a minute since we spoke.
It has been a minute. What's going on?
Right. Let's get your two guests you had earlier, and you perfectly described what's happening with both sides of the argument. They saying the same thing time and time and time again, and they've convinced themselves it's the truth. Let's look at it. Total human emissions of carbon in the atmosphere is 11%.
Yeah.
The UK makes less than 1% of that. Right? Now, we've outsourced everything to China, which they built. You said, they're building loads of coal-fired power stations. It's worse than that. They built 153 last year. We were the leaders in burning clean coal that actually put out very little carbon. They used the dirtiest coal possible. Now, they're building our solar panels and our windmills, and if the aim of net zero, right, of these zealots was to save the planet, right, they wouldn't have done what they've done, because it doesn't make any sense. We've multiplied by God knows what factor what's going out in the atmosphere for the sake of the UK, and it gets worse.
Yeah.
Grant some subsidies to build the solar and wind farms, right? It came out this morning that, what's his name, So it's Vale. His name Dance Vale.
Dale Vince.
Vince Dance, sorry.
No, Dale Vince.
Dale Vince, right. He makes 0.02% of the country's electricity, but he's had £145 million in grants in the last 10 years. The wind farms that they built.
I think I have to say this in defence, when you talk to Dale, and we've had him on many times, Mike Graham's had him on, he will say, actually, they don't get any grants. It's not, it doesn't work like, there's nothing that benefits him specifically.
No, he does enjoy his private jet, and he
definitely hasn't got a private jet, I can promise you that. He doesn't even fly anywhere.
Look at what his ex-wife's with. That's another thing. Let's get back to
there's something happened 40 years ago.
Sorry. When demand is low, all right, when the demand from the consumer in England is low, because we've got no battery storage, they turn them off.
Yep.
But we still pay for what they can produce, all right?
Correct.
And then when it blows too hard, they turn them off because it doesn't do the machines any good. They break up evidently.
Yeah, something like that.
And then there's the interconnectors, which your Irish chap talked about. They haven't built the interconnector, which there's one that was meant to come down the sea, down from north to south.
Yep.
That was costed back in the day at $6 billion, and that was in those prices. And we always know they underestimate. They always go 2 times over.
Yeah, of course they do.
A couple of years plus.
Well, he said Ed Miliband's building it, didn't he? He said all this storage stuff, give it a couple of years, it'll be done.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, right? He's talking about he's got storage in his house, all right? You can get a Tesla battery, which is about the best on the market. You can get a 10 kilowatt battery.
Yep.
You'd need at least 2 in a 3-bedroom semi, all right? They're about 10 grand each, all right? And there is no commercial sized battery storage anywhere in the world, and they reckon we're decades away from being able to produce something that will do it. So we're not going to have storage. Now, the other thing is, when the wind blows too hard, and so they switch them off, we then, because the Conservatives, because they've got their fingers in this as deep as Labour, sold our gas storage facilities. So we have to go to the market to buy the gas. Now, they know what's happening to the gas people, so sometimes that gas we have to buy because we can't use the wind is 4 times the normal price. And Miliband, in his latest X, stated the price hike in the cap you were talking about with Peter, who I like greatly, caused by the fossil fuel markets and the Ukrainian invasion is total rubbish. Gas was 20% lower at the start of the war than it is now. I didn't give you the price for the land interconnector. Again, this was some years ago, right? We know they're going to go over, and it's some years ago. It was 85 billion.
Yeah. Well, some suggest, rather cruelly, Chris, that Ed Miliband is living in cloud cuckoo land. I mean, that couldn't possibly be the case, could it? In fact, and Chris, thank you very much for your call. He put out a tweet yesterday saying, we know that any price rise is of concern to families. Wholesale gas price remains 75% above their levels before Russia invaded Ukraine. This is the fossil fuel penalty being paid by families, businesses and the economies. And that was community checked by one reader who said this is incorrect. Gas wholesale price as of the 9th of July this year, that's Ofgem's latest release, is 47% of the cost it was before the Russian invasion. 90.87 now, 194.11 then. Electric wholesale price is 49% of the cost it was before the Russian invasion. 83.55 now, 172 then. So someone's not being completely truthful. Ed Miliband says that is why the only answer for Britain is this government's mission to get us off the roller coaster of fossil fuel prices and onto clean, homegrown power that we control to bring bills down for good. This is costing an arm and a leg. He says, we're determined to support families now. That includes expanding the £150 warm home discount to 2.7 million homes, more households this winter, our warm home plan to benefit millions, and stepping up our overhaul of the energy system to increase protection for customers. There's a lot of hot air in there, Ed. We could probably run the grid on that alone. David's in Newcastle. David, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, sir. How are we doing? Okay?
Very good, thanks. So what's the answer to the UK energy bill crisis?
Oh, yes, honestly, I haven't got a clue, but I was telling your researcher there before that my wife and I, we live in a Victorian mid-terrace house. It's it's a biggish house, 5 bedrooms. We've got everywhere we can have insulated. We've got it insulated, double glazing, the most efficient U boiler a couple of years ago. When the war in Ukraine first kicked off, my wife and I were paying £750 a month, gas and electric.
£750 a month?
£750 a month.
Man alive.
Our friends who've got a similar house just along the road from us, I hope you're sitting down here, them were paying £1,000 a month.
Get out of here.
I swear.
Just for electricity and gas?
Just for gas and electric.
Which is probably more than their mortgage payment.
Well, they're well off, don't get us wrong, they both work very hard for the NHS all their lives. And I said to her, Julie, regardless of whether you can afford it or not, you shouldn't have to pay £1,000 a month to heat your house.
Correct.
And at the moment, it's obviously the prices have come down. We've just changed suppliers. But now, I laugh when I watch the news. It says like the energy price cap, the average family are paying £1,700 a year.
Yep.
We've got obviously we use a lot more in the winter. Our standing order now is for £480 a month, gas and electric.
Man alive! I mean, that's twice what I'm paying, and I think I'm paying too much.
We're doing everything we can, and my wife even says we're never sitting in the house in the winter. We're luckily, it's a double-edged sword here because they're trying to ban fossil fuels. We've got original fireplaces in every room,
right?
So we're burning. It's not coal, I would say. The oils you get.
So it's not as if you're using a separate source to heat your home.
To complement because if you're sitting, you never sit. If you just got your heating on, you never sit and think, it's boiling here.
No.
We've still got 2 fires on all year round in the winter as well.
Got it. Yeah. Because with those older houses, they do require a bit of force to make the place warm enough. Listen,
we're doing everything we can.
So it's not like you're oblivious to it and you're just going, I've got a very expensive bill. You're actually thinking about it. You've got the double glazing, the insulation in the loft. You've got all of that going on. And it's still that kind of price. David, thank you for that. That's a fascinating call. I don't know if anyone's going to come up with a bill that's higher than that, but he was paying £750 a month a few years ago. Now, still paying nearly 500 quid a month for energy. And of course, it's the example I always give on these things. If you said to our forefathers, I don't know, not even 100 years ago, but 50 years ago, 40 years ago, what would it be costing to heat and energise homes? The smart money, like most things, would be, by that stage, it will be a lot less than it is now, because we'd have, got to a place where we've worked out a better way to do it, and we've worked out more efficiency. You wouldn't be thinking it was so expensive that some people can't afford to put their heating on. Imagine Victorians who had no heating at all. They'd have been dreaming of the day when some wise old local said, mark my words, in decades down the line, there'll be heating automatically in every single home. People would have thought, wow, really? I mean, council houses in this country didn't have heating in them in the 1970s, for God's sake. But it became a reality. There's heating in every home. Those same Victorians would never have believed that, yes, there is heating in every home, but people just can't afford to turn it on. We're almost no better than we were 100 years back. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
allegation in the Bournemouth area, which I sort of hesitate to go into detail. Maybe we'll save it up for another programme. But in short, it's a very, very serious potential crime there, and a lot of talk about it there. Number of people who've got a bit to say about it. I've not really been able to nail this, and to say the police are being tricky would be diplomatic.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A little bit of breaking news on the automotive industry. Britain's top sports car manufacturer Lotus is axing more than 500 jobs from its UK headquarters. Tariffs implemented by US President Donald Trump are said to have played a major role in the announcement. The company currently has about 1,300 workers at its site in Hethel. That's the latest. 500 jobs going from Lotus. Is that the shape of things to come? Stu in Swindon referenced the jihadi in jail in America who wants to come to the UK. Why can't we treat our jailed terrorists the same as the Americans? 23 hours locked up, no contact with other prisoners. We wouldn't have attacks on prison guards. Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, when you look at what's happened with the Manchester Arena bomb, or the architect of the bombing, and the attack. I mean, these people have nothing to lose, of course, so they're quite casual about it. You know, they're already in there for the rest of their life. They're not coming out, and so there is one of the problems. David's in Huddersfield. Back to energy, David. What have you got for us? Hi.
No, well, I don't know. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, hi, David. What have you got for us?
Yeah, the guy that you got talking on about is how it's the cheapest form of energy, wind and solar.
Yeah.
And if they turn the wind generators off because of not being able to pump it into the system, they have to turn them off when the wind blows too much, because they just blow up. They won't produce when the wind isn't blowing enough. The solar won't produce when there's no sun. And he's saying, he's going to be marvellous now because he's got these batteries and it runs his house all night. I work at a place, it has a UPS system. It's critical to have the power on. The battery room had to be refurbished. New batteries in a few years back because they can't guarantee that it's going to store once they start depreciating. 300,000 quid.
300 grand?
300 grand for new batteries. Wow. Then you have to get rid of the old batteries, and you've got maybe 5-6 years at best to do, and it's going to be again, and they'll be dearer by then. The man's a fool. He doesn't realise that while the wind is producing and the solar's producing, they've still got to keep the gas generating plants up and ready to fire in once the power goes off because there's no wind or sun.
Yep.
You're paying for the backup running all the time just in case.
Yeah.
They're just not feasible.
No, they're not feasible at all. Can it be, I mean, some people reach a compromise and go, could it be feasible in years to come? In the same way a television used to cost you about 20 grand.
Well, can you keep the wind running at the right speed and everything to run those windmills?
Yeah.
You can't, you know. And
no, but if you can store the energy of the windmill, then you can reuse it and all that caper.
Yeah, but look at the cost it's going to be to have enough batteries to run the country, the national grid. You ain't going to be able to do that.
I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, I'm no scientist. I'm not an engineer in this field. And I don't think you have to be, David, do you, to work out. And bearing in mind, Ed Miliband's talking about doing this in about 36 months.
Ed Miliband's an absolute goon. There again, he's not a goon, is he? Because he's that company that's giving him all his advice. He owns 70% of it, doesn't he?
Well, no, he doesn't. The Secretary of State does.
Aye.
It's not him personally. I know what you mean. There is that. Yeah, it's said often on social media that the owner of the company is the Secretary of State, Ed Miliband. When the Secretary of State changes, they will also technically own it. But yeah, you're right. Listen, I hear you, David. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. More comment coming in from you on a whole range of stuff. We are going to talk landlords as well in just a second with Paul Champlina. This one comes in from Joff, who says Ed Miliband should just quit now while he's... Well, he's not ahead, is he? While he's ahead. This way we could have somebody who can bring balance to the entire debate around net zero, something that has completely been lost in this zealot-like appeal or zealot-like appeal, I think it should be appeal or journey anyway, I assume he means, to net zero. And it is exactly that, isn't it? It is that sense that this has got to be done tomorrow that is the big problem. I think we can all say it till we're blue in the face. You bring me cheaper, freer energy, I'm buying into it. And if it's cleaner, fantastic. That's got to be better. But we haven't got it at the moment, and there's no sense it's going to arrive any time in the next couple of weeks. So until we get to that point, we have a problem. 0344 499 1000. What is the answer to the UK energy bill crisis? More from you on that. We'll talk to Paul Champlina on landlords and the potential new tax coming in the direction of landlords who are already being hit left, right and centre at the moment. Details on the way. It's 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just me, says Ian. I have a half-brother who lives in Melton Mowbray with his wife. It's a 2-bedroom semi, and in the winter he turns off his gas supply, so no central heating, no hot water. All they survive on is an electric shower and boiling kettles to wash up. They huddle in one room. And when you're getting a bill that is in the hundreds, rather than, 40, 50, 60 quid, I mean, the significance of that shouldn't be lost on anyone. It's a massive... This is the difference between, as exactly was said there, between trying to heat your house and not heat your house. Well, I'll just... there's a few people I know that they're not badly off, that have kind of opted for the same thing. It's not necessarily that you can't afford something. It's the sort of why would you pay that amount for something? Just because you might be able to afford it doesn't mean to say you're okay with it. So there's quite a lot of that going on. There's also a lot of this going on. It's not a day goes past when there isn't a story that centres around the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Apparently she's plotting a new tax on landlords. Treasury officials are planning to apply national insurance to rental income. This, of course, was an aim to help plug the £50 billion black hole in the public finances, targeted unearned income. They love the unearned income, as if you don't earn it if you're a landlord. Critics warn the move could push up rents by encouraging landlords to sell their properties. Well, it will do exactly that. They'll put up rents or they'll just sell the property. Let's get our regular man who helps us out with these kind of stories. He's the founder of Landlord Action. Paul Champlina is with us. I mean, can you believe it, Paul? We've debated for I don't know how long the Renters' Rights Bill, all of the implications of that. We know that separately, coming in, there's going to be energy considerations, your EPC and all the rest of it. That's got to be tip-top. You've got to get to a C. There's mass cash implications on that as well. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a national insurance on rents. What is going on?
Ian, the answer to your question is, of course I can believe it.
Yeah.
You've got to bash the landlord of the working people. Well, not according to Keir Starmer. Look, the reality is they've gone on the assumption in the 2022-2023 figures that there was 27 billion quid's worth of net income, of which if you charge national insurance at 8%, it comes in over 2 billion quid. Look, the reality in the landlording world is completely different to the norm. So the problem is that landlords don't currently pay income tax on the income. They pay income tax on their income after offsetting against mortgage interest relief, which got abolished in 2017. That was the big game changer. Let me just run through some events, especially for your viewers.
Yeah, please do.
And of course, the unintended consequence of all of this is exactly what you said, Ian. Rents go up, good tenants get evicted, landlords sell their properties, we have a housing shortage, and it defeats the whole means of obviously giving tenants greater security, which the average tenancy at the moment is over 3 years, and we want that to continue and be longer and longer, so that tenants can stay in a property which is their home. So, look, the reality is this: believe it or not, there's in 2025, 2026, the government will make £330 billion on all receipts, which is about 27% of receipts. That's £11,500 per household, 11% of national income. That's the generic. But
they're making that from where, Paul? From landlords?
No, not from landlords, from the generic. That's
the generic
of income.
Okay.
So I was just trying to break it down. So in 2017, George Osborne, he abolished mortgage interest relief. So most landlords had mortgage interest only mortgages in their own name. And what he said is, over 4 years, we're going to phase it in, and then you'll either be paying your base rate, which is 20%, 40% or 45%, okay? So overnight, that changed everything, and it meant rents went up. So that was the start. And then, of course, what happened was there was an additional stamp duty at 3%. As of this year, it's gone up to 5%. So if you're going to buy a buy-to-let to rent out and to house a family or individuals, you're paying an additional 5% stamp duty. In 2017 or 2016, they abolished wear and tear allowance, so that was another abolishment. And then, of course, obviously, as a landlord, when you sell your property, you're going to be paying between 18 and 24% in capital gains. Okay, so that's they're their generic fixed sums of tax that you're going to be paying generically.
Wow.
Some have got companies and they're incorporated and they draw dividends. But basically, and the nuts and the bolts of it is that things have changed. And since 2017, landlords got hit more. And of course, landlords should be incentivized to stay in the market because of our housing shortage. So, and of course, in 2022, you had mortgage interest rates rise through the roof for landlords, albeit they had it really good for a long time. So their fixed term mortgages came to an end, which meant landlords were selling up. And then, of course, they got the Renters' Rights Bill. And at the moment, they're in ping pong season. And then there's obviously conference season. And then, of course, landlords have got added burdens, responsibilities, because they are offering a service, but of course there's extra cost with that. And of course, in the background, background, like you quite said in the intro, is EPC, electrical performance certificates, will have to be upgraded to level C, which means that a big substantial cost has to be put on some properties to make it up to that level, or they're going to be unmortgageable. With all of that going on over the course of time, rental demand are still 60% above pre-pandemic levels, of which you've got 11 tenants fighting for one property. And we're seeing firsthand, and the business I set up 25 years ago at Landlord Action, we're seeing more and more landlords now waiting for the abolishment of Section 21, this non-fault eviction notice, and then they're whacking in and serving notices, which means that good tenants are being told to leave because landlords don't want to be landlords anymore because they're not making any money, they're not making their pension. Being called a landlord is a dirty word, even though it's a housing provider, and then there's unintended consequence of supply, unfortunately. It sounds really doom and gloom, doesn't it?
It is quite doom and gloom, isn't it? And I think it does come back, and maybe you won't be so subtle on this, Paul, I don't know. It's not normal for you in that respect, but I just sense that what underpins all of this is an inherent dislike or distrust, to be kinder, from this government of landlords. They see landlords of all, almost like the old leftists would have seen the landowning gentry, like they all live in a big old castle. They're looking down on their tenants. They don't give a toss whether the place has got a roof on it or it's full of mould. They're trousering huge amounts of cash on a monthly basis. They didn't even buy the houses. They came with their fiefdom. These houses were given to them, almost stolen back in the day from peasants, etc. They have this sort of bizarre kind of almost Simpsons-like comedy
Mr.
view.
Burns.
Yeah, it's that view of this industry, and that's what gives them, I think, the reason Rachel Reeves and Penny Cook and others can sleep soundly at night is because they don't think they're really damaging anyone with this, because they're just bloody landlords who are earning too much money anyway, because they're all squillionaires.
Of which the homeless minister and Angela Rayner have quite blatantly said they are landlords. But I think the reality is your assumption of how the government perceive landlords is how landlords feel. I speak to them, I train, like next month alone, I'm doing 6 talks up and down the country to landlords. I ask a question regularly, Ian, and we do it when we do our panel sessions at the Landlord Investment Show. How many of you, I mean, a lot of them are full-time landlords, because it is a job. Yeah. It's a 24-hour job, you know, taking calls from tenants, servicing, being compliance officers, offering a service. There is an argument to say that a lot of landlords should actually have their properties fully managed now, especially for their full-time employment. But when you ask them a question, how many of you actually tell people you're landlords? Hardly any hands go up. They're ashamed. It's like a dirty word.
Yeah, it's like describing the world's oldest profession, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the minute you mention landlords, you're in some kind of bracket. And I've lost count of how many times we've done phone-ins on this, or at the landlord investment shows when I've spoken to landlords, people who've got one property, they might even have a mortgage on that property, so they're charging, for argument's sake, Paul, something like £1,000 a month rent, of which 500 quid is their own mortgage on the thing. So straight away they're down to £6,000 a year. Out of £6,000 a year, of course, they've got to run the place. They've got to now pay to go on a database to make them official. There's the EPC consideration,
the letting agent fees, EPC, gas safety,
electric, the whole thing. So at the end of it, they're coming out with about £2,000 a year to rent a house out. This is not somebody who's having it off royally and making buckets of cash and living in Barbados half the time.
And the argument is to say, well, shouldn't I just stick it in an ISA?
Correct, yeah.
I mean, and that's where landlords are getting to. Landlords, you know, I know that have got massive portfolios, small portfolios. This, unfortunately, how it's been leaked today, and, you know, I'm doing a few interviews today and various other stations as well. This sounds like it's on the horizon, and it's going to be stuck into the next budget.
Yeah,
I really do fear for it.
This kind of stuff, as you well know, Paul, governments are great at kind of throwing a little idea out there, just to sort of the litmus test to see how people feel about it. But this one's like looking quite likely at the moment, because again, they do this with impunity. It doesn't, but it's just land. They see it as a passive income, as money that hasn't. It's unearned income. It doesn't really matter, and of course, it's not that.
That's it. You just said it's unearned income. It's mental. Landlords are being taxed on turnover, not profit. which no other industry has that.
Yep.
I think, you need 1 million more rental properties by 2031. You're not going to be getting that, even though the private rental sector has stabilised. Let's be fair. There's a lot of institutional landlords coming in. There's a lot of build-to-rent operators coming in. There's other smaller landlords getting in. But I can tell you now, in Q1 for 2025, there was 451,000 properties up for listing, of which 70,000 of those were ex-rentals. So if they're ex-rentals, it means those landlords wanted to sell them.
Yep.
And if they wanted to sell them, they wanted to sell them with vacant possession because they would get more money. And that means tenants are being asked to leave, whether it goes to court in a broken system or whether they leave voluntarily. It's a worry, because landlords are needed in this industry because people need to sleep somewhere.
100%. And of course, as we now know, the Renters' Rights Bill, which accelerates those costs even further, the price of getting something wrong, it's so huge, the fines that are being proposed around this. I mean, if, for example, you forgot to put yourself on the database with your local authority, you could be looking at £7,000 for a fine. Now, if I walked into Rachel Reeves' office and smashed her desk up with a baseball bat and set fire to all those historic financial books, I wouldn't get fined £7,000. But if I forgot a little bit of admin, £7,000, and the next offence could be 14 and then 21,000. I mean, these are massive numbers.
Ian, are you putting forward some sort of campaign or something to be voted to actually carry out those actions? I don't know.
I think I should. Look, you and I speak to... You and I, particularly yourself, you speak to a lot. This is, in your DNA, Paul. You know this industry well. And in the last few years, when I've been hosting the panels at the landlord investment shows, there's 3 more this year. There's one in Bristol, October the 1st, Manchester, October the 14th, London, October the 29th. I know you're going to be at all of those, Paul. You will meet those same faces who say... Is it still worth it? I mean, I think on balance, if you're doing it right, I think it probably is.
Well, it is.
It's still it's a question nonetheless that is being discussed like never before.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is being a landlord is a profession, and I'm putting an event on the 28th of September at the NEC at the Holiday Inn, a whole day on renters' right. It's called landlordchanges.co.uk is the website where we're going to be doing training for a day because landlords need to up their game. They're offering a service.
Yep.
You're quite right that if you get something wrong in the new world, when we reckon the new regulation will come in maybe 1st of January, maybe 1st of April next year, a tenant can make a claim to a landlord for up to 24 months of rent in a rent repayment order. So if you've evicted incorrectly, you're not on a licence, you haven't put on the database, and a lot of self-managed landlords do get it wrong, and the innocent ones, dumb insolence is not a defence, and that's why you do need to seek professionals and be updated and trained.
So what did you say? If they get it wrong, the tenant can then try and claim back off the landlord?
Correct. So what will happen is, and we're seeing a lot of landlord action, tenants quite rightly deserve to have a decent property, have a good service, pay reasonable rent, not be discriminated, and have security, right? Because they want a home. And that's why the government have brought in cross-parliament, because it was Conservative and Labour, where they brought in the Renters Reform Bill, now Renters' Rights Bill. What will happen is you'll get a lot of solicitors acting for tenants, saying, has your landlord done this? Has your landlord done that? And I can tell you now, because I represent a really big company, we own My Deposits, the deposit scheme, we still get tenants, landlords that have not put the deposit in the deposit scheme. And that legislation came in April 2007. So I think that this could be carnage for a lot of landlords, simplistically getting things wrong, not being compliant, not knowing what they're doing, and then being on the hook to actually pay the rent back to the tenant. We are in a massive change of time we're entering now in the land of renting.
We are indeed. Listen, Paul, it's always great to get your view. It's an expert opinion as well. Paul, thank you as ever. Paul Champlina. He's the founder of Landlord Action. You can catch Paul debating on panels and goodness knows what. As he said, he's at the NEC in Birmingham. If you Google that, Bristol, October the 1st. That's the Landlord Investment Show, Manchester, October the 14th. And I'll be hosting and chairing a panel. This is going to be really lively, I think, because these are... I promise you, despite the urban myth that Angela Rayner would like to throw out there, These are just honest working people who are being penalised left, right and centre with new legislation, layer upon layer, tier upon tier of new legislation. Much of it makes no sense, but all of it is hugely expensive. Is it worth it? And the crunching irony, of course, of all of this is that this is an industry that is quite literally propping up the housing crisis in this country. The government are kicking their own, not just in the shins, but in the whatsits as well. And yet it's that very industry and those very individuals, those men and women who rent out properties, that are helping Angela Rayner's department. So those debates, and Old Billingsgate, 29th of October, I'll be chairing one there. I reckon that could be possibly one of the liveliest ever if this comes in. I mean, they've been pretty lively over the last few years. But if this extra, here's another tax for you landlords, here's another cost, here's another expense. It's an interesting, if that is your profession, just tell me what you're thinking of doing. Sticking with it, leaving it, finding a way to circumnavigate it. Good luck with the last one. 0344 499 1000.
There is still no real announcement. There's no meat on the bone, and that's what people will want. And the real problem is that when you've got people like Jack Straw, who is saying that you've got to do something to the ECHR, he's not saying pull out, but he is going very similar to looking at derogations or suspend bits of it. When you've got David Blunkett, a former Labour Home Secretary, saying something similar.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And before we go any further, day 21 of The Voice of Doom, day 21. Okay, is the record like 23 days or? Oh, 21 is the record. So could we exceed the record if it doesn't go today? All right, so this is Mystery Voice, but it's always a politician or somebody heavily involved in the political world, but I can tell you it is or was a politician. No longer with us, I can tell you that much. Have a listen to the voice.
I certainly have things to say.
You've got to go back to the 1970s, sort of the mid-70s, really. Think Northern Ireland. Think Northern Ireland, OK? So there's the first clue. Think Northern Ireland, think the 70s, so don't be guessing that it's Ian Duncan Smith or someone like that, because it isn't. Northern Ireland, 1970s, here's the voice again.
I certainly have things to say.
87222. 87222. They're the only clues today. Mid-70s, Northern Ireland. All right, here's the voice.
I certainly have things to say.
87222. If we get a winner, we will reveal all after the news. If not, it rolls over for an all-time record of 22 days tomorrow. Stand by, and we'll let you know after the headlines. Back to your calls. Jason is in Wiltshire. On the issue of being a landlord, Jason, what are your thoughts on this? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking the call.
It's a pleasure.
My urine is boiling.
I bet.
If you know what I mean. I'm a landlord. I'm self-employed.
Yep.
I don't have a pension. So I've put money in. Me and my wife, we've bought houses. Okay? We're in a good position. We've got 3, 2 are paid off, and one's only got a low mortgage on it. But again, it's this Communist Party. It's another hit on us, the landlords. What we sacrifice and what we do to provide a service for people who have nowhere to live. If they didn't have us, they'd be absolutely buggered.
There'd be carnage in this country without the private rental sector.
We're penalised on everything we do. I don't know why this Communist Party doesn't like private landlords.
It's very well because they're dining out on the old stereotype, Jason. I know I keep saying it, but it's very true, isn't it? This is a classic example of the left looking at landlords as the pirates of bricks and mortar. But you might as well be, one of the great train robbers, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, what I think the left actually want to do, they don't want the likes of me and Tom and Fred up the road. What they want is big corporate companies to come in, buy property portfolios, and it be ran through these big corporate organisations. You'll have like pension fund companies.
Yeah.
If you think about it, property is a good way to fund pensions. I just can't understand. They look at us like we're sort of some multi-millionaire come landowner. I'm just a normal person. I'm just trying to make a future for myself. Do you know what I mean? And they just want to penalise you everywhere you can go. You're just getting shafted. And I won't give up being a landlord because they're trying to do all this because they know at the end of it you can make an income on it and you're going to
well, that's right, because they see it.
You to do it.
They cannot countenance the idea that there is a profession out there that they don't have, as they see it, full control, full financial influence over. So they look at you guys as people who've got away with it. You've got away with it because it's unearned income. The idea that you don't have to put any effort into, renting out a house is obviously for the fairies.
You've got to put a lot of effort into
Of course you have. And of course, we all know there's rogue landlords. They're few and far between, relatively speaking. And good landlords want to get rid of those landlords as well. But you don't define an entire industry that way. But that's why they're relaxed about it, Jason, because they don't see landlords as a sort of an engaging, proper job. In fact, I think they even once, was it Raina or somebody in her crew that described landlords as not really working people as such. Listen,
no, that's what I said. We're seen as just high class. We're rich landowners. But the problem with this Labour Party is they're so short for looking at the end of their nose. If they get rid of all the landlords, where's everyone going to be?
They're going to be stuffed. But I tell you what, I think you're right about that idea that they quite like the idea of big conglomerates coming in and running. Or they'd be fine if some Chinese businessman bought half the houses and rented them out. That'd suit them OK. Jason, great call. Thank you and well done for persevering and carrying on with it. Will we get a right answer to the voice of doom? Here's the voice.
I certainly have things to say.
87222 if you think you know who that is. This is day 21. Will we bust the record? Will it roll over? Find out after the news at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the Afternoon Empire and the home of common sense. 0344 499 1000. We are talking about Ed Miliband's net zero lunacy being blamed for a shock rise in energy bills this winter. Wasn't meant to happen to this extent. Ofgem confirming that wind farms are actually driving the costs up. I thought it was meant to save us money, for God's sake. Also, former Prime Minister Tony Blair. Tony, how did this happen, by the way? Tony Blair joined a White House meeting with Donald Trump to discuss plans for post-war Gaza. He was around the table in the Oval Office. And Apple has warned that EU-style rules proposed by the UK competition watchdog to make it easier for small competitors are bad for users and bad for developers. We'll get the latest on that in our weekly tech feature shortly. Lots to talk about, lots to get through at this end. 0344 499 1000. This from Stuart in Bexhill, who says, my wife and I are accidental landlords, as are a massive percentage of landlords. You didn't set out to do it. You either inherited a house or you sort of dipped your toe into a single or two properties. They've got one flat. We are both retired and on pensions. Are we now expected to pay national insurance, pay our own pensions? This just proves what we all knew, that national insurance is just tax under another name to fill the coffers. Yeah, it's exactly that, Stuart. And, you know, you own one flat. You're not squillionaires out of that. It's a nice little addition to your pension. I'm sure that's how you look at it as well. It helps. It just eases things a bit. That's the kind of thing, frankly, in any other world, you'd be incentivised for doing. You'd be congratulated for doing. Governments will be going, thank you, because you're taking the heat off us a little bit because you've used your own gumption and gone out and done something for you. And it's working in the very reverse of that. Just before we move on to Tony Blair and what the hell is he doing at the White House, Voice of Doom. So we've had this voice running for 21 days. This is the voice.
I certainly have things to say.
These are some of the guesses. Roy Mason, Peter Shaw, Alex Douglas-Hume, Francis Pym, Edward Carson, Airy Neve, William Whitelaw, Merlin Rees. None of these are the correct answer, but have we got a right answer? Man alive, we have got a right. In fact, we had 10 right answers. I only gave 12 now. So do you know how devastating this is at our end? 12 correct answers. The only clue I gave was that think the 1970s and Northern Ireland. Now, the Northern Ireland in the 1970s was pretty busy, politically speaking, for obvious reasons. So there's so many names. Even if you Googled Northern Ireland 1970, I can only imagine you'd have got 100 names come up. However, 12, probably more people now, have got it correct. And I did say throughout this whole thing, I hadn't even heard of the person. The answer was Brian Faulkner. Brian Faulkner, Lord Faulkner of Downpatrick, no longer with us, passed away in 1977. He was the 6th Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, a role that doesn't exist in that capacity anymore. From 1971 until his resignation in 1972, he's also the Chief Executive as well of Northern Ireland from 74 to January 74 to May 74. How many people have heard of Brian Faulkner? I mean, well done to those that got it right. We'll name check a couple. Steve, Bexley-Heath, Craig, somewhere we don't know, Bill in Ashford, Joanna in Salisbury. 12 people got it correctly. These are the first 4 that came through correct. And Finn, one of our producers, has said clues are now banned. I didn't think they would give away clues. I thought that was quite easy. Could have been anyone. But there it was. It was old Brian Faulkner, little toe rag, sneaking in on the 21st day, which means we have a brand new one. We start from scratch tomorrow on the programme. Let's talk of things that are infuriating. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair has joined a White House meeting with US President Donald Trump to discuss plans for a post-war Gaza. Blair, who served, of course, as Middle East envoy after leaving office in 2007, focused on boosting Palestinian economic development and creating conditions for a two-state solution. The US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff said Washington is preparing for a very comprehensive plan for the next day after the conflict, though a few details so far have been revealed. Joining me now, Michael Graham, our man on the Hill, US political commentator, managing editor of Inside Sources, with his ear firmly to the ground on these matters. Michael, good afternoon to you. Look, I don't need to explain much about Tony Blair to you. He's a global figure. But the nearest analogy I came up with is it's like inviting Dan Quayle to a meeting. Right. You know, you just wouldn't do it, right?
Everything I know about, like most Americans, everything I know about Tony Blair, I learned from watching the movie Love Actually. So I'm just waiting for the naked guy to come out and sing. That's my whole,
absolutely right. Thing. But for some reason, they thought he might be a good voice around the table.
And what's interesting is Trump has changed the view of Gaza in such a huge way by talking about this idea that there is a future. That's the thing that people have always missed, the two-state solution. That there's no future because so we have another state that digs a bunch of tunnels and attacks Israel again. And so Trump has put out this idea of a future. And what's interesting to me is how sticky this idea has been, that people who are mainstream, and Tony Blair is definitely a mainstream politician. You know what I mean? He's not Nigel Farage on an edge. He's not Le Pen. He's not whatever. You know, he's right there in the middle. Sure. And the idea that he's engaging in this conversation about, well, let's look beyond the horizon to a future where you don't have nonstop warfare waged against Israel, where you have something else. I think that's interesting and compelling. And I think if you could find some other Tony Blairs around the world to enter this conversation, it'll cause more people to take it seriously. And the question is, but what do you do about the actual people in Gaza? That, of course, that's the final trump card.
Yeah. I mean, Blair, you know, for all of his faults, of which there are many, I mean, some argue he actually started a couple of wars in the Middle East. So what the hell's he doing around the table? Right. But nonetheless, you know, regardless of how contentious that specific point is, he was probably happiest in his skin when he was doing global things.
Right. And you also have, he's also an experienced hand at the war of Islamism. And you haven't talked about this a lot since the end of the Iraq war and Afghanistan. But, you know, remember, that was the fight from 2001 until whatever, you know, was it not Islam as a whole, not even close to Islam as a whole, but this, you know, hardcore group of people who had this view. And I think it surprised me how little the coverage of Gaza focuses on the fact that Hamas is an unapologetically Islamist group. They reject the kind of Islam that you see in Jordan and that you see in many parts of Egypt. They specifically say, no, it's got to be the, you know, this, you know, very narrow. There's a reason why Iran, which also holds this fringe view of Islam, you know, backs them. And so Tony Blair has been through that fight. And he's not going to be naive about it. I would argue that during much of the global war on terror, as it's called, the UK and America were intentionally obtuse about it. We just didn't want to admit that there was this religious component. You know, George W. Bush kept saying Islam is a religion of peace, which was demonstrably not true. Islam is a religion that many people practice in peace, that most people practice in peace, but definitely has room in its theological construct for this other more violent vision that other world religions at this point in history just don't share.
Yeah, it is indeed that. And Donald Trump, of course, has a lot resting on this, doesn't he? I mean, he's got Ukraine, but certainly what is happening with Israel and Gaza, this has got to be solved, and it's got to be solved fairly soon.
Well, particularly with the looming fear of the kind of violence in Gaza that no one wants to see as Israel pushes into Gaza City and the true stronghold of Hamas. And I don't know, I have to be honest, I'm watching this. First of all, the whole thing is intractable. When people say two-state solution, the answer is, another state to kill Israel. When people say you just have to get the hostages back, then, but that means that they'll be taking more hostages in the future because you made hostages more valuable. I don't see, this is such a Gordian knot. And, I think Trump's theory is that his personality can be the blade that just cuts the knot, or that there's some fiscal, financial, isn't there a deal? I mean, look, that's Trump. Trump's a New York City developer. Yeah. Why can't we all just get rich is his answer. And the problem is that, once again, Hamas and that vision, they're not interested in worldly happiness. They have another vision. And so let's just get rich. I don't know that that's going to be the solution.
Indeed. Well, we'll watch with interest, but I do sense that this has just got to happen at some level of speed now. Trump doesn't want this dragging on for another 2 years, right?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And Israel doesn't want it dragging along. And whenever Israel is in a shooting war, its support globally goes down. And then when the war ends and you get back to something like normality and all you have left are the whack job Islamists, conducting acts of terror, support for Israel goes back up. Because war is ugly and people don't want to see it. And it's hard to watch and on and on and on. So everybody needs to compress the time frame. The question is there a two-front diplomatic, if you will, war going on against the holdouts and Hamas and their allies, which is on the one hand, Israel has the tanks rolling to the city.
Sure.
The other hand, you have people like Tony Blair, once again, not some fringe character joining up with Donald Trump to put pressure on the other side. Isn't there a deal to be made? And so force plus the willingness for a deal, will that be enough to cause Hamas to finally get serious about a resolution?
While you're with us, Michael, we should get a word on what happened in Minneapolis yesterday. A horrific school shooting. We know that 17 injured, 2 young children died in this, and the perpetrator killed himself, as so often happens in these cases.
Yeah, and it's horrific, and I know that the UK has a hard time understanding how Americans are allowed to own the guns that we own. It was the issue of the gun culture is just hard to see, but to understand if you didn't grow up in it like we did. But we'll say that I think one of the elements of this horrible story that's good, well, two things. One is the media in the U.S. is taking a shellacking because they've worked so hard to mislead their consumers about what happened. The guy who committed this crime was a guy who identifies as a woman. The news outlets literally lied about it. CNN went on the air and lied about it because they didn't want to report the unpleasant facts.
Yes.
And that's not going to last. I mean, we are past those days. There's too many ways to get information. I know the BBC did some tweaking of some pronouns in some of their coverage as well. The second thing is people are now starting to make the point, as Democrats push back on President Trump's decision to send the National Guard into D.C., that this shooting is a typical weekend in Chicago right now, and that these large blue governed cities have a level of violence that, while they're right that crime has gone down year to year, they have a standing level of violence that most Americans just reject. And that's why a fascinating poll this week showed, I believe it was 81% of Americans supported the idea, because shocker, everybody, people like safety. They like being able to go out at night and not be scared. They like to know that when their daughter's on a date that she's going to be, going to come home. People want public safety. And when you look at this horror of this single morning in Minneapolis that's left us so shocked and grieving, and extrapolates that's a typical weekend in cities around the country, it just makes the case that there's too much tolerance for a level of violence and crime, and we need to develop more intolerance. And that's Trump's message. He's very simple-minded about it. Crime bad. Let's stop it.
Do you sense as well, Michael, and I've long wondered this, that school shootings have really become a kind of go-to display of sheer violence for the unhinged of a certain age? Right. It has a copycat nature to it.
Right,
you're going to go out. You're going to go out with a bang. I don't think this is to do with gun control at all. I think that's a red herring when anti-gun organisations and the like step up and say, "Look, this is what happens. Look, if you want to go nuts in a school, you'll find a gun somewhere. You'll find a knife somewhere. That's irrelevant. You'll still find it." But because it's seen as this kind of very high profile, the most lethal and dramatic way of going out with a notorious bang, I sense that's what happens here. And, there's a certain age correlation between those that carry out the crimes.
And the killer, 23, left behind a manifesto that he placed on YouTube, and then it got pulled down. But before it did, people spot. He actually has a line, something like, "I'm finally going to do this thing that I've had in the back of my head." He knew it was a suicide proposition. And it goes back to Columbine. Since Columbine, you've had this storyline, and you add the issue, the impact of social media on young people. This is such a new revolution. We don't know what it's doing to us. You add the increased isolation of people from community that really got a boost during COVID. Then you add this notion that there are people who can have these clearly have mental challenges about who they are. And instead of like treating them or reaching out to them, you go, no, your completely untrue view is totally legit. You go, person. You add that all up together, and it appears to be a climate that generates the spike in the number of violent, mass shooting, violent crimes committed by people identified as trans. That story is going to be a story for a while, at least here in the U.S.
Indeed. And on a lighter note, when we talk about US issues, we didn't even mention Taylor Swift, and long may that continue as well, Michael. I think we should try.
I am one of the few people, I don't even know. My wife was mocking me. She's like, you must know one Taylor Swift song. No. And I finally remember she does that Shake It thing, right? Isn't that her? Shake It off.
Yeah.
Isn't that her? Please tell me that's her.
That is definitely her.
It's not
even
old guy
I
music.
know
It's
that.
just right. Exactly. It's not that I only listen to old guy music. I listen to all kinds of music. I just don't. To her thing, whatever she does is not my thing.
Yeah.
That's it. But I listen to all the current stuff. You know, Dean Martin and
Tammy Wynette.
Current. Isn't that?
Yeah,
chairman of the board.
Listen,
old blue eyes.
You're the
Isn't
most
that
relaxed man when a bit of Perry Como is playing in the parlour. I know this. Listen, great to have you with us, Michael. As ever, Michael Graham, our man in Washington on Capitol Hill, with the latest from over there, including that shock news that Tony Blair pitched up at the White House for a bit of a tete-a-tete with Donald Trump about solving the Gaza problem. Who'd have thought it? 0344 499 1000.
People keep saying, and they said this when reform hit 10%, then 12%, then 15%, they say, oh, they've peaked there. They can't possibly go any higher in the polls, but they seem to keep going up. Zia's been very clear, we do need 350 plus MPs to do what we need to do. You hear a lot, we've had this huge petition with, about 1 million signatures to have an immediate general election, but I don't think that is what Reform will want. They'll want the Labour Party to mess things up so badly that it gets even worse for the Labour Party in terms of their support.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 22 minutes after 3 o'clock. Phil says, Donald Trump and Tony Blair in his office is going to tell Tony Blair to tell Starmer to wind his neck in or else there'll be consequences. It might be that. Maybe it's nothing to do with Gaza. Joanna in Salisbury says, oh my God, Tony Blair trying to sort Gaza, a bit of a joke after his reputation was destroyed over the lies he told about Iraq. Remember, Joanna, they weren't lies, they were just misinformation that he thought were true, apparently. Debbie in Devon says, this is reference property, one of my children is already paying £1,500 a month in rent. If it goes up due to this tax rate, I don't know how they will manage. It's absolutely disgraceful, especially when Labour wastes so much of our money. I despair of this rotten to the core government. And thank you, Debbie, for that. That's the other thing. Kids of, young ages. I don't know how old Debbie's kid is in this particular example, but £1,500 a month on rent. So a landlord comes along, he's told he's going to have to pay a national insurance. It's going to take £100 a month off the landlord's profit, and the landlord's profit might not be that great anyway. So that £1,500 becomes £1,600. And it's already massively expensive. It's already off the scale expensive due to a shortage of housing and ineptitude of governments, this one and previous ones. So where does the story go? You could we discuss often about people staying at home with mum and dad into their 30s. Well, we're going to move that to their 40s? Will people ever leave home? Simon is in Derby on this issue of landlords. Simon, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian. Thanks for having me back.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I rent 4 houses, and a bit like everybody else, just sort of accidentally got along, and as a way of bolstering my pension and not having all my eggs in one basket, I thought I'll spread the poison around a little bit.
Yep.
And at the end of it, I think there's so many issues with this controversial subject that really, the government views landlords as like a little cottage industry.
Sure.
It's not important. It's important when they're taking tax off us. Oh, that's fine. But when it's actually, but they don't seem to, like you've stated earlier, about providing a service, and it actually investing in property is quite a nice way of helping people. Yeah, I'm helping myself as well, but I'm taking a lot of risk.
But you're taking the risk. You're absolutely right. Directly or indirectly, you're helping other people. You're also less reliant on the government.
Correct.
Because you have an income that you've worked hard to provide for yourself.
Yeah, and not everybody just thinks everybody's desperate for a house. Yes, they are. But there's a lot of people who don't want to own a house. They actually prefer renting.
100%.
So all you hear about all the time is the rotten apples, in life there's always rotten apples in any industry that you're in. There's always going to be, but it's sort of like this sort of medieval view of a landlord. He's allowed to deflower one of his tenants on the marriage night. It goes back hundreds of years. It's that image, isn't it? Oh, he's a terrible sort of tyrant.
It's crazy. Do you know what? It's funny you say about people not wanting a house. When I sold a house, the house I had in East London, and I didn't want to buy another one. I was single. I just thought, I don't want to own a house.
Yeah.
I'll keep the equity from that. That becomes like your next deposit, as it were. So I rented a place, and I rented for 8 years. And lots of mates said, no, you're throwing good money after bad. You need to buy somewhere. I thought, no, in my head, at that stage, I didn't want to buy a house. I wanted to rent one. The landlord, it was £1,000 a month, the rent, and it never changed in that 8 years I was there, because Pete, the landlord, was a thoroughly nice bloke, got on with him really well. He used to come around every now and again. We'd have a cup of tea and a cigarette back then. It was absolutely fine, because he had a good tenant. If I needed anything, he'd lay a new carpet or stick a radiator in. But it was worth his while not to increase the rent because of a good tenant. Now, if he was put in an impossible position where it became ridiculous to allow that scenario, he would have had to have put the rent up, and these are the kind of examples.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a lovely lady doctor in one of my apartments. She actually said, "Do you mind if I pay you more?" And I said,
wow.
She was perhaps taking that over the narrative in that she was taking control, that I didn't want to whack the rent up, which I haven't done. I would never do that anyway.
Yeah.
But she said, "Oh, is it if I pay you 30 quid a month?" I said, "Yeah, if you want to, that's fine," and I accepted it gladly.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, the other despicable thing that the government are doing is where they said, "Oh, we don't want to tax any more than the man in the street," but they are doing, because it's just passed down.
100%.
When you buy a bag of potatoes from a supermarket, if it goes up 10%, you get hit in your pocket. So it's just making the assumption that we don't see it. And who's the easiest person to kick? Oh, the landlord, yet again.
And do you know what? And also, I suppose, if you look at other small businesses and national insurance and various other business rates and taxes and all the rest of it, this shower currently in power that we've got over there, Simon, in Downing Street, are... these are the left-wing brigade that grew up with beliefs like private property is theft. They grew up believing that even if you run a small business, you're probably secretly a millionaire somewhere along the line. They don't get it. None of them have ever run anything either.
You're not allowed to be an entrepreneur.
No, that's a very bad word, because according to them, everyone's a James Dyson or an Alan Sugar. There's no such thing as a small business that works hard, whether you've got a retail company, a small garage, painter and decorator, or you're a landlord. Most of these people, like yourself, would be regarded as small businesses.
Well, we're just all painted in one colour.
Yeah.
We're having you, whether you like it or not.
You generate disposable income for yourself that you can spend into the economy. You are less likely to need to rely on the state for anything because you've got your own income and your own business. But that's apparently all irrelevant.
But not in a union either. Perhaps we have to have a union.
Maybe you should be in a union. They might do business with you.
Yeah.
Love it. Listen, great call, Simon. Thank you very much indeed. Simon in Derby. Let's go back to Net Zero and what's going on there. Charlie is in East Sussex. What have you got for us, Charlie?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Do you know what? I'm going to stop listening to your programme because I tell you now, everybody that comes on, doesn't matter what subject it is, the government, it's abysmal. They're doing this, they're doing that. It's driving me bonkers. Anyway.
It's not good for the heart.
Well, I always do when I come on. It's like, talking about bonkers, Ed Miliband.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, are we really, as a country, taking this man seriously? Look at who he's surrounded by. What is the agenda? What aren't we being told?
Yep.
Why is our energy this price? Why are we subsidising it all? These are questions that we really, really need to be asking ourselves, and it's we're in a very, very worrying situation. I think the country at the moment. I spoke to my son earlier, who lives in Canada, and he's saying, "Dad, what's going on over there? It's mental."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well," he goes, "What's your energy and electric and gas bill?" Well, I said, "Well, I'm paying 250 quid a month. That's just me and my wife at home, two of us. We're not energy suckers."
Yeah.
And he's saying, "Well, I'm paying." Well, mine works out to about £47. I have the aircon on all the time.
That's madness.
It is. Yeah. So what really is going on with it all? And I think you had a lady on earlier. I think her name was Anne. I can't be sure. And she was talking. She gave you all those like routes to communism, basically.
Yes, our first call, Anne in Sussex.
And I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but sometimes a normal bloke in the street is going to sit back and think, actually, do you know what? She could be 100% right.
Yeah, I think she was onto something there. I know it sounded like an analogy or, worst case example, but I think there might have been something in that. Listen, I've got to move, Charlie, just because of time and no other reason. Thank you for that. On a similar related note to Charlie, though, Pete says, I live in Georgia. I don't know which Georgia that is. My monthly energy bill is 60 quid. It's crazy in the UK. Why do people pay it? Let's get a voice note on landlords. This comes in from Vicky.
A lot of landlords are very good, and all they are doing is trying to work like any other person. They're just doing it in a slightly different format. And they're often, very good people. They look after their asset. Why should they get taxed any more than Joe Bloggs? They're actually providing a service for people that can't afford homes, which is very, very difficult in itself. And what they're doing as well to second homes people, I think is disgusting at the moment.
Bang on as well, Vicky. Thank you very much indeed for that. Back with more. We talk science and tech in just a second. There were some cracking stories. Some will disturb you. Details coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk, 25 to 4. Don't forget, of course, Jeremy Kyle on Drive this afternoon. He'll pop in before the news to tell us what's going on in the meantime. We're joined, because it's a Thursday, Sean Keach is Head of Science and Technology at The Sun. Welcome, Sean. Always good to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Let's start with this, because we had an Apple story last week about the regulation of encryption and all that surrounded that. But now Apple are, and maybe they would do this, wouldn't they, because it's their company, warning the UK against introducing tougher tech regulation. So what's going on here?
So it's actually not just Apple that's under fire, although Apple has put out a statement today, but it's Apple and Google. There are sort of these parallel investigations going on from the CMA, the Competition and Market Authorities. Yeah. And they're basically cracking down on them, saying they've got too much power, they control too much of the markets. When you look at phones, you know, they're saying 90 to 100%, I expect it's really closer to 100% of phones are all Apple and Google phones. If you've got a Samsung, that's still a Google phone because it's running on Google's Android. Yeah. So they control all the phones. Obviously, Google runs the biggest search engine in the world. If you're a developer trying to make gadgets that work with the iPhone, developers are saying, well, it's very difficult to get our gadgets to work as well as the Apple Watch works with the iPhone, or the AirPods work with the iPhone. And so the CMA is looking into all of these large numbers of different ways that maybe Apple and Google have too much power. And they're basically trying to decide whether to give them this status called strategic market status, which is basically, you're too big, and if you don't play ball, we're going to fine you massive amounts of money. I think it's up to 10% of global revenue, which is, you know, for those companies, a huge amount of money potentially.
What have they got to do then to not be as big as they are? Is it about opening up competition?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways they could do it. Obviously, they're looking into so many different things, but for instance, you know, when you go to the App Store, if you're on an iPhone, the only way you can get apps currently in the UK is via the App Store. In the EU, it's very different. You can download from third-party app stores. Now, Apple will say it's important for security and it's important for privacy. We don't want you downloading dodgy apps from other app stores. So you can sort of see both arguments, but it's about giving users choice. So it'll be like, you know, when you launch your phone, is there a choice of lots of different browsers to use? You know, if you have an Android phone, is Google only recommending Chrome, or are there other browsers that you can use? Yeah. I mean, Google quite rightly is pointing out that you know, even though it does run the world's biggest search engine, it's getting challenges now from OpenAI and Anthropic and all of these other AI companies.
Sure.
And so it's saying, well, you know, we still are under threat, and we can't be giving away our sort of secret source to these other companies. So it's difficult, but you know, the CMA ultimately is trying to protect us, you know, regular consumers. They're saying, you know, if for instance, one of the examples they're giving is when you buy something, when you have an app and you buy something in an app like a Spotify subscription, app makers want to be able to do that off the App Store so that they don't have to pay Apple the 30% charge. And they're saying, well, we could bring prices down if, you know, we don't have to do that. Apple is saying, well, we put all this money into the App Store, we invest, we create the devices. We should be able to charge this.
Why would we not make a few quid? Yeah,
exactly.
There's a cost. It's not free.
Yeah, exactly. And then Donald Trump has actually waded into the debate, as he often does. You know, and he's saying, show respect to America and our amazing tech companies, or consider the consequences. You know, he's very against the rest of the world regulating tech companies. So.
Just sticking with Apple for a second, we're a couple of weeks away from a new iPhone.
Oh, yeah, so they've sent out their invitations for the big event of the year. It's September 9th, so mark your calendars. It's 10 a.m. California time, which is 6 p.m. here, 6 p.m. here, so tune in. We'll be covering it on The Sun. So we're expecting a new iPhone, probably going to get some new AirPods too, which is quite exciting, a couple of new Apple Watches, maybe even a new virtual reality headset, which is very exciting. They've actually put an interactive logo on their website this week, which is very mysterious. It's getting a lot of speculation going, because if you click the logo, you sort of get a sort of thermal imaging heat map, and people are thinking, well, is there going to be a thermal camera on the iPhone? Is it just a hint that we're going to get some new colours? Maybe we'll get blue and orange colours. Are they just going to run cooler as iPhones, and then you'll get a bit of better chip performance? So speculation is rife. It might mean nothing at all. It might just be Apple sort of playing tricks.
Would it be? We discussed this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? With phone upgrades, whatever phone you've got, there is that sense that in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, there hasn't been that sort of significant thing, you know, like I can remember when, you know, a calendar first arrived on a phone. It was like, wow, it's got a calendar. This is amazing. You know, you can play music on this one. All these incredible developments, and of course, it's been a lot of, you know, some have suggested sort of fairly superficial things that are quite interesting. You know, who doesn't love a new emoji? But they're not game-changing. There was a rumour that it was going to be a slimmer phone. Do you remember that?
That is still the case. That is probably the big news of the event so far. The big prediction is that we're going to get an iPhone 17 Air, so a bit like the MacBook Air or the iPad Air. Apparently it's going to be 5.5 millimetres thin or thick, whichever way you look at it. So, I mean, I suppose that being the big rumour, you know, speaks to your point that actually it's very difficult these days to innovate with phones. These companies have to keep doing them every year. But it's quite hard, you know, you're very constrained by the form factor. That's why we're seeing foldable phones come out, because there's only so much you can do to squeeze into a phone. It's like the cameras, you know, they've reached a point where you can't really put much bigger of a camera into a phone before you start inconveniencing people.
That's true.
So, you know, they're sort of reaching the hard limits. And one day, you know, in the future, maybe it'll all be on our head. We'll have headsets, smart glasses, but for now, they need to be a bit more creative, which is why we're seeing AI features a lot of the time, because it's sort of a bit easier to put into a phone.
But then even some of that stuff, you think, well, am I ever going to need some of this stuff? Some of it might be useful. Somebody did tell me years ago that I think it was the iPhone 10, where the camera, or the one after that, the camera, photographs taken on one of those phones ceased to be distinguishable by the human eye to the one before, because they could give the data and say it does this, point X, Y, Z, and it zooms in on this, but the human brain wouldn't see it any differently.
Especially as we're looking at all of these pictures through tiny screens anyway. So
That's
you know,
true.
it's so rare that we put them on a big screen. I mean, there have now been a couple of movies that have been filmed on iPhones. But you're right. Generally, if you're just taking a picture in the daylight of something, it won't really look very different from a few iPhones ago. Where you tend to see the performance is usually low light, so like night photography, because you get better sensors. Sometimes it's in the detail or the zoom. For instance, Google's just put out a feature on its new phones where you get 100 times zoom, which is, I've been testing it, and it's pretty mind-blowing, to be honest. I can show you some photos later if you're interested, but they will be on The Sun in the review. But that basically uses AI to sort of generate what it should look like at the 100 times zoom. It's very, very spooky.
That is quite strange, and this is just the start of it all. Let's move to Xboxes. Age checks for Xbox users, is that right?
It never ends, these age checks. And I think as these age checks are popping up more and more, I think people are getting increasingly incensed by it, because I suppose at the beginning it was very much, you know, this is going to be on adult sites, and people can kind of put up with it because it's to protect children. I think now it's starting to, oh, there's an age check for this and an age check for this. Xbox is age checking people now, and you'll lose access to some online features if you don't pass the age check. So they're asking people to do it now. It won't happen until early 2026. So if you haven't age verified by then you'll lose access to sort of like online game chatting. So if you're, you know, you enter a Call of Duty game and you hear the voices, that'll be cut off for you completely until you pass the age check. So it'll be scanning your face, showing your ID online. It uses the app Yoti, which is quite a popular way of age verification. They're trying to get ahead of it, so they don't want this sort of hard deadline where suddenly everyone's cut off. So they're warning people now. They're sending out emails. So if you've got an Xbox, you might have had an email this week saying, please age verify.
Well, I have got an Xbox, but my little boy uses the Xbox. He's 11. Now, he keeps banging on about, you know, why can't I play Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto? You sort of gently explain, well, you know, these are kind of games for older kids and there's stuff in there. And of course, they do see YouTube. A swear word to a kid these days is not like it once was. You know, it's a bit more prolific in all sorts of platforms, from music to, you know, the aforementioned YouTube, etc. So, if his name went on the age check, he would never be able to play Grand Theft Auto, right?
Yeah. So. Yes, but currently, if you've already bought the game, even if you fail the age check, they won't like retroactively ban you from playing the game. It's because you've already paid for it. So like if you've played it, you won't lose your achievements from that game. So it's not a retroactive check if you already have it. Yeah. I think there's the irony with Grand Theft Auto is that, you know, once the kids become old enough to play Grand Theft Auto, there's no more time to play because you've got to go out and get a job and you don't want to work, and there's no time for gaming. Sadly, I wish I had more time to play.
Well, the trouble is, it's a whole social thing as well for kids, isn't it? Because, you know, they know their mates at school, you know, I'll see you online afterwards because they're going to play Fortnite or whatever it is, because that's so big, and, you know, they all join in with it and they're aware of it, and it's a conversation piece. They're excited by it.
I think I saw this week actually that Roblox, which is sort of similar to Fortnite, it's one of these big, massive online games. It's a bit like
hundreds
Minecraft.
of thousands of games.
Oh yeah, this week I think it hit 46.5 million concurrent players, so players playing at the exact same time, which is just a staggering number of people.
That is, yeah. Have you ever played Grow Garden?
No, but that's one of the two games driving it.
You familiar with it, Sam? I mean, that sounds very innocent, doesn't it?
It's Grow Garden and then a brain rot game.
Steal a Brain Rot.
Yeah, Steal a Brain Rot, and those two are driving
My house is haunted
that.
by Steal a Brain Rot. It is, Finn loves it because Finn just thinks to hear a man over the age of 50 even use the phrase steal a brain rot is somehow incredibly amusing, which I suppose to a degree it is.
But immensely popular, you know, people love it. And, you know, I think they don't want to block these kids from playing these games, but they just want to make sure that you're not winding up in sort of virtual multiplayer lobbies with other adults where there might be unsafe content. So that's what the age verification's about on Xbox, certainly.
And also with those games as well, because they keep talking about the administrator, you know, somebody called Sammy on, I don't know if it's the Garden one or the thing, and Sammy's going to get into a battle, almost sort of WWE Vince McMahon style, you know, the manager's going to join in, the admin's going to join in, and I don't really want to say to him, well, Sammy probably doesn't exist. Sammy's probably just an AI-generated thing on the screen.
You can't crush the dream, Ian.
I know.
It's like Santa Claus of the modern age.
Yeah, and Grow Garden sounded like, it says, wow, it's his return to innocence, because it's just about growing your garden, because it's much more than that. But these are massive games.
And also they have a whole sort of world around it. You know, people go on Twitch and stream them playing, and people are watching people play the game. So it's, you know, massive industry.
And of course everyone goes, well, Roblox is free. Well, kind of, but if the minute you get on it, I mean, try telling an 11-year-old it's free forever, because once they want to start buying things and adding things and blah, blah, the list goes on.
But I suppose, you know, when I was a kid, I was spending money on Pokemon cards, so I guess it's, you know, the modern equivalent.
Back, of course, in the last couple of years. So
you should check if they're worth anything.
Yeah, you should. There's an app, isn't there, just to do that, precisely that.
Or maybe I'll pass them down to my grandkids.
Photograph the card, I think, from the app, and it will tell you whether it's worth, you know, 500 quid. Because my kids tend to think all of theirs, you know, this one's a rare. This is a real rare. It's worth £3,000. It's like, well, probably not, and it's probably a moody one anyway. But let's talk Netflix. Their newest hit. They've crowned a new overall winner in terms of ratings. Who is it, and what's it about?
Yeah, so they've published new data on the most watched films on their platform ever. So of all time. And top of the list is, and you know, if you've got any parents at home listening or watching this, K-pop Demon Hunters. It's the big hit. It's had 236 million views since it came out. So it's beat Red Notice, which has Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds. It's beat that. It's beat Carry On with Taron Egerton. It's beat Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. This is an animated musical movie, and it's smashed to the top of the list. It came out mid-June, I think, and you know, it's a massive hit. It's got a sing-along version. K-pop Demon Hunters.
Yeah. Have you seen K-pop Demon Hunters? Sam has. No. Adam hasn't.
I watched it last night for research, and actually it's all right. It was all right. Some catchy tunes. Yeah, and the soundtracks are going wild on Spotify as well. It's big business. They're thinking about doing a sequel. They're thinking about doing a stage musical. So there's lots of, you know,
a stage musical. It's
mega. K-pop is a big world.
No, I'm aware.
People are going mad for it.
That whole world is huge in itself, of course. And what's interesting about the changing face of media and how we consume films and entertainment. Just that stat that you would not so many years ago you wouldn't have been able to read out a figure that this got 236 million views.
It's huge
because that collective idea wouldn't have been there. But streaming, of course, changes all.
And it's interesting because it's it's not backed by massive Hollywood names. There are some relatively big voice actors, but it's not the sort of likes of Dwayne Johnson. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, it's an animated movie and it's aimed at kids. So what we might see now is Netflix maybe doing some more content for kids because it can clearly draw in numbers. Now I'm sure there are plenty of adults that watched it, without kids, but it's clearly aimed at youngsters. And
I think a lot of people,
it drives the audiences.
People without kids don't realise the kid offerings on, like even Amazon. If you look on Amazon and go to the kids section, you've seen it, Sam. I mean, it's just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it is insane, and that's just what you go to Netflix, the same thing, and Apple, etc. I mean, there's nothing you can't watch.
And they'll rewatch it and rewatch it. The K-pop Demon Hunters, they'll just rewatch 10 times, 15 times, sing along. It's great fun.
It's not quite the end of the holiday season, but it's fair enough that we mention this. An urgent warning to Brits over dangerous travel adapters. Are these people buying moody travel adapters for about £2?
That's exactly what it is.
Don't do that.
Don't do it. It feels like simple advice, but a lot of people do it. And part of the problem is that they're being sold online through like TikTok, and they've got sort of people saying, "Oh, this is amazing. You should definitely get this," and it turns out that they're dodgy. So this charity, Electrical Safety First, they've tested 15 travel adapters, and they're basically saying they could cause fires, maybe even kill you. Some of them are so dangerous. They have live pins exposed. Some of them are like travel adapters where it's from multiple countries. So it'll come out with the US plug, and then it'll come out with the EU plug, or all of the plugs are coming out at once, which is dangerous because then you have live connectors. So they're saying basically just don't get them from online platforms if they're extremely cheap. Go to a trusted high street retailer, or if you are going to buy it from somewhere like Amazon, make sure it's like a really reputable product from a known brand with lots of reviews, because if you're looking for a bargain, you might be playing with your life. And it's not worth it, for saving a couple of quid, just get something safe.
I know that adapters, particularly if you buy an Apple adapter, they're ridiculously priced. I mean, I do get that, but I simultaneously think, it's not as if there's not a lot of video evidence out there, because there is of, I don't know, electric scooters blowing up because of the charger issue, phones blowing up, someone set their Chihuahua on fire because, it was the poor thing had its bed next to the charging point, etc. But there's so many, even on, have you ever, those YouTube ads that go, when you go to watch a YouTube video and an ad comes up, and it's often something like a student from a university somewhere has discovered free electricity or something like that, and they tell you that, and you've got to watch the full 10 minutes to get. There's one where a guy's invented an air conditioner, and it's clearly not true.
Yeah.
But it's on YouTube, so it must have passed some sort of. And when I say it's on YouTube, it's a YouTube ad.
And it adds legitimacy, and you think, well, if it's on the platform, then it must be safe.
That's what I'm saying.
And after this investigation, all of these companies came out and said, we have all of these checks, we do all this stuff, we take down so many, but ultimately stuff is going to slip through the gaps.
Of course it is.
YouTube will scan its ads to make sure they're legitimate, but they can't catch everything.
Just buy the proper stuff. Buy the proper stuff, because
spend the money, or you might explode in the night, which you don't want
on your way to Torremolinos.
It'll ruin your holiday.
It will absolutely wreck it. Listen, we are out of time, Sean. Where can people go to have a look at these stories in more detail and everything else that you do over there in your department?
If you want to head to the Sun's tech section, the Sun Tech, we've got loads of content on there, including stuff about all of these stories. And I also have a Substack called The Sun Tech with Sean Keach. It's a newsletter. It's free. It comes out every Thursday. So there was a new one today. You can check that out.
And there's often a lot of chance for some free stuff as well.
We write about free stuff all the time. I think sometimes it's self-serving, because I also love free stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yeah, so loads of free stuff. Check it out.
Good work.
Find some good deals.
Sean, thank you. We will see you next week. Sean Keach from The Sun with us on the programme. Back to you in a couple of moments. And we'll talk to Jeremy Kyle. This is Talk.
People keep saying, and they said this when reform hit 10%, then 12%, then 15%, they say, oh, they've peaked there. They can't possibly go any higher in the polls, but they seem to keep going up. Zia's been very clear, we do need 350 plus MPs to do what we need to do. You hear a lot, we've had this huge petition with, about 1 million signatures to have an immediate general election, but I don't think that that is what reform will want. They'll want the Labour Party to mess things up so badly that it gets even worse for the Labour Party in terms of their support.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Just lob the old headphones back in. Jeremy Kyle's going to be here in around about 2 minutes' time. In the meantime, let's talk to Charles in Doncaster on the issue of landlords. Charles, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Ian. Yourself?
Yeah, very good, thank you. What are your thoughts?
Very confused about our government's thought process when they look at...
they're hopeless.
No, they're not that good.
They're not that good, you're right.
Raising national insurance contributions for landlords. I'm 74 years old. I have a number of properties in Doncaster. We consider ourselves to be responsible landlords. We look after our tenants. We give them a decent standard of accommodation and hope that they will look after the place that they're in. And so far in 20 years, that's worked well for me.
And also, it should be said, the thing that gets forgotten, you're also running a business, so you pay tax and you're not reliant on the state. You know, you're a business like other businesses.
Of course. But what really gets to me is, you don't pay national insurance above the age of 65.
That's a good point.
So how the devil is that?
And also, the one thing we haven't talked about this afternoon, why would it be called a national insurance? Who would you be nationally insuring? with this?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
It sounds like just another tax, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It is another tax. But to call it national, I mean, I'm quite happy for him to call it a national insurance tax because it's not going to affect me.
Well, let's hope it doesn't. Charles, you've been great. Thank you very much indeed. Charles in Doncaster. One here from S says, unearned income, which is how landlords are often described. Worked 20 years hard labour in my properties. Lost sleep, 4 hours sleep daily. I sold up, rents to go up, can't take any more. There's absolutely a lot of sense in that. Paul in Belfast says, afternoon, Ian, the government is in denial. Rachel from Accounts says the economy is growing, but it's shrinking. Starmer is smashing the gangs and returning the illegals, but the Armada grows daily. Ed Miliband says our electricity bills are smaller, but they're practically the highest in the world. Yvette Cooper says they'll be closing migrant hotels, but then is challenging the decision to close a migrant hotel. Lies, lies, lies and lies, says Paul in Belfast. Paul, you are bang on at every level on that one. And in from Mark in Norfolk, means test those in social housing. People live in them for decades. Hundreds of thousands of existing social housing tenants were means tested when they applied for housing, but a few years later, on good earnings, they should vacate for those in need. Very few people should need more than 15 years at a council house. There you go. That is a line of thought that I've heard before. Jeremy Carlis here with a packet of biscuits.
Well, these are new gluten-free biscuits.
Are they
because
really?
At the age of 60, I've been diagnosed with, as you know, so I have to be very careful.
As you know,
yes. This is the 4th day of a 10-day shift. I'm on breakfast tomorrow morning for the next 6 days.
Oh, you are, aren't you?
Yes. Morning, all.
Yeah.
But Mike's on a plane to America, trying to get us a gig out there, and I'm going to be sitting in. Help me out here. What's been the numero uno?
Well, it's been 2 landlords. And a national insurance, which until our last caller, we didn't even work out why would they, if there was a tax added, why would it be called national insurance? Who are you insuring?
Nobody.
Well, exactly.
So they're going to tax landlords, people that have more than one property?
Well, it would be, yeah, one would assume it would.
So Angela Rayner's in the poo, isn't she, to be fair?
She's got 3. I know.
Although I had a rumour that the reason that she's bought that £800,000 house in Hove is that she's going to, there's a chance she could lose her seat up north in the next election, so maybe she's going to take over Brighton and Hove, of course, which is predominantly sort of liberal and left-wing.
They would quite like Angela Rayner, perhaps, down there on the coast.
Ethiopia, when I'm back for a trip with me. Have you seen that when she goes, I've gone to Ethiopia? Yeah. Unbelievably talented.
It's beautiful.
It's unbelievable. I'd have thought more of Ed's green policy.
And Ed, so the 2 side by side.